Lin Lin bit her lip. It was my husband who sent me to tip you off. Huh? Hith. Xiao Ran was rather surprised. Your husband actually sent you? Yes. Lin Lin nodded, her pretty face flushing crimson. Initially, her husband had been furious, wanting nothing more than a dice. Xiao ran into meat paste. But after a few days of starvation, the loudmouth had gradually changed his tune. When death was knocking at the door, what else mattered? So, the loudmouth had even taken the initiative to send her to Xiao Ran. But could she really say that out loud? It was far too humiliating. My husband believes Jiang Wan is no match for you. So, he sent me to warn you, and also, to get on your good side, Lin Lin explained. Because of the power outage, the entire garage was pitch black around the clock. So, Xiao Ran hadn't bothered waiting for nightfall, and had taken Baozi out for a walk at noon. Half an hour later, Baozi, unable to stand the cold any longer, prompted their return to the villa. Just as he was about to enter the passage, however, Xiao Ran froze, halting in his tracks. He took a few steps back and swept his flashlight across the area. 2 bodies were missing. Xiao Ran was certain he'd killed them all himself, so he knew exactly how many bodies should have been there. 2 were gone. Corpses didn't just sprout legs and wander off. Besides, the toxins in the hail only caused death. He'd never heard of them turning people into zombies. So, the 2 bodies couldn't have reanimated and absconded. That left only one possibility. Someone had taken them. Why? Food. In his previous life, Xiao Ran had been betrayed by his ex-wife's family, dismembered alive, and used as food. This made him extremely sensitive to such matters. Counting the days, it was now the 12th day of the apocalypse. It was hardly surprising that many families, having exhausted their food supplies, had been forced to turn their attention to corpses. After all, when people were pushed to the brink of starvation, was there anything they wouldn't dare to eat, or couldn't bring themselves to eat? Xiao Ran sighed. The scene of cannibalism was, once again, unfolding. In the face of survival, men and women alike had cast off dignity and morality, regressing to a primal state. Xiao Ran shook his head and led Baozi back to the villa. Night fell. Lu Bingcheng's room. Over 20 people had gathered there that day. Lu Bingcheng sat in a chair, nursing his last cigarette. It was already down to the filter, but he couldn't bear to toss it. In truth, he'd been remarkably frugal to make a single pack last this long. Time to move. He finally flicked the cigarette butt away. Yes, sir. Everyone chorused. Lu Bingcheng was intelligent and influential. Crucially, he had 4 highly skilled bodyguards, inspiring deep trust and fostering a strong sense of unity among his followers, qualities that figures like Su Feng and Li Zhonglin had lacked. They grabbed their tools and set out. Even Lu Bingcheng's mistress accompanied them, child in her arms. Their objective for the day: see Xiao Ran's villa. Once they had the villa, what use was this dingy room? The group quickly reached the villa's location. However, they didn't enter the passage. Smash it, Lu Bingcheng ordered coldly. Instantly, 2 men wielding large sledgehammers stepped forward. Over the past few days, besides recruiting people, Lu Bingcheng had made another vital preparation: gathering sledgehammers. As luck would have it, a unit in their residential complex was undergoing renovations, supplying him with 2 large sledgehammers, the kind used for demolishing walls. Knowing Xiao Ran controlled the passage's fire sprinkler system and could unleash poison water, how could someone as astute as Lu Bingcheng make the elementary error of attacking the villa through there? No door? Then just smash through the wall, couldn't they? Thud, thud, thud. The 2 men began hammering at the wall. People on the sidelines were even chanting encouragement, some shouting, 80, 80, which made many others burst out laughing. The man swinging the hammer soon tired. He lowered the sledgehammer and said, switch. He was indeed exhausted. So, another man took over. Sledgehammers were designed for breaking walls, perfectly suited for the task. They quickly punched a hole in the wall, which steadily grew larger until a person could squeeze through. By then, the men swinging the hammers had already been swapped out 5 times. A bodyguard named Lu Bo chuckled. Xiao Ran must have heard the racket, but we're not playing by his rules, not using the passage. All he can do is watch helplessly. Another bodyguard, Chen Chang, also laughed. That's our boss Lu for you, always thinking outside the box. Why insist on the door? Can't we just smash the wall? Haha, change your thinking and a whole new world opens up. Lu Bingcheng offered only a restrained smile, but inwardly, he was immensely pleased. He was already calculating the potential spoils of their venture. Clang! The man hammering was about to deliver the final blow to break the wall completely. He swung with all his might, But the impact sent such a shock through his hands that the webbing between his thumbs and forefingers split open. Every bone in his body vibrated. It felt as if his insides were about to be jolted out. What in the world? What was that sound? Sounded like metal on metal. Is there a refrigerator or something behind the wall? Everyone quickly shone their flashlights through the hole. The surface behind the wall glinted with a metallic sheen. Is this a steel plate? Someone asked, tapping it. The dull, heavy thud confirmed it was metal, though they couldn't be certain it was steel. They were all dumbstruck. This was unbelievably bad luck. Try a different spot. They moved to another section and resumed hammering. After another half an hour, they finally punched through another hole large enough for a person. But when they cleared away the rubble, they were met with disappointment yet again. More metal wall. Could the entire wall be reinforced with a metal layer? Unwilling to concede defeat, they decided to tear down the whole section of the brick wall. They'd already made 2 large holes. Demolishing the rest wouldn't take much more effort. Then, as they shone their flashlights, an intense metallic glare reflected, so bright it made their eyes ache. What a crushing discovery! After all their painstaking effort to tear down one wall, they found another behind it, solid steel, no less. Forget their sledgehammers. Even with hydraulic cutters, how long would it take to breach a steel wall? And to take it a step further, even if they had such tools, would they even have the power to operate them? No. So, under the current circumstances, this wall was likely impenetrable. Their earlier elation was now matched by an equal measure of despair. What now? All eyes turned to Lu Bingcheng, who frowned deeply. He hadn't anticipated this outcome at all, and, for a moment, was at a loss. That brat actually turned his villa into such a fortress. Lu Bingcheng lamented. Xiao Ran had bought the villa and, instead of moving in immediately, had hired people to renovate it. Many knew this, but everyone assumed it was just a simple redecoration. Who could have imagined this? Was this what you called redecorating? It was clear he was building an impregnable stronghold. The others murmured in agreement, but commiseration wasn't their goal. They wanted a solution, a way to break through this ironclad fortress. Just then, a hole appeared in the wall, and Xiao Ran's voice drifted out. Can't sleep in the middle of the night? All this banging. Aren't you afraid of waking the neighbors? Xiao Ran, if you have something to say, come out and say it. Lu Bingcheng said coolly. Didn't you put a bounty on my head? Well, here I am. Come and get me if you've got the guts. His words sounded brave and righteous, but Xiao Ran was alone. How many men did Lu Bingcheng have? Was this fair? Xiao Ran chuckled. Lu Bingcheng, you certainly have the air of a leader. Not only did my bounty fail to take your life, it actually helped you rally more support. But firstly, those followers of yours are just a disorderly mob. And secondly, I simply couldn't be bothered to increase the reward. Otherwise, believe it or not, your little troop would fall apart instantly. Lu Bingcheng roared with laughter. Fine, name your price. The higher you go, the more supplies you must have. So, when we drag you out and finish you off, our haul will be even bigger. Why should we wait for your handouts when we can just take it ourselves? A true big-shot businessman. He knew how to sway people. Why beg for charity when they could just take it by force? And get even more. Instantly, any hesitation in the eyes of the crowd vanished, replaced by firm resolve. Xiao Ran just smiled. If he were to lay out a feast fit for an emperor, would Lu Bingcheng still be able to talk so calmly and confidently? But he couldn't be bothered. Lu Bingcheng, I'm right here. How do you plan to get my supplies? He said with a smile. No matter how eloquently you speak, you're ultimately just feeding them empty promises. Do you think they'll be foolish enough to follow your orders forever? Lu Bingcheng said coolly. So, you plan to hide in there forever, like a coward in his shell? His only play now was to provoke Xiao Ran, to make him come out on his own. Otherwise, he really had no options. Breach such a steel fortress? Impossible. Xiao Ran smiled. How about this, Lu Bingcheng? I'll make a deal with you. What kind of deal? Lu Bingcheng frowned, a sudden sense of foreboding washing over him. Xiao Ran hadn't been provoked at all. He was perfectly calm. This deal definitely wouldn't be to Lu Bingcheng's advantage. Xiao Ran grinned. Since you're so full of righteousness and morality, so concerned for your so-called brothers, how about this? Let your woman come in here and entertain me. In return, I'll give each of your men a pack of instant noodles and a bottle of purified water. What do you say? Now, the dilemma was Lu Bingcheng's. Earlier, Lu Bingcheng had offered to send his mistress to Xiao Ran. Was he sincere? Obviously not. He had 4 bodyguards. He surely intended to ambush Xiao Ran the moment the door opened. Once Xiao Ran was captured, the whole villa would be his. Why would he need to make a deal? So, Xiao Ran now publicly proposing to trade for his mistress naturally made Lu Bingcheng's expression darken. But the problem was, how had he united those people in the first place? What kind of persona had he built? Loyalty, brotherhood, follow him, and he would lead them out of their predicament to a better life. Now, here was an opportunity. If his woman just slept with the other guy, each of them would get food and water. Was he willing to make a small sacrifice for his brothers? In normal times, who would dare ask a billionaire CEO to make such a sacrifice? But now, a billionaire CEO was just an ordinary person. So, Lu Bingcheng had merely tricked everyone with his smooth talk. When it actually came time for him to give something up for his brothers, would he refuse? Wouldn't his carefully crafted image shatter instantly? You accuse me of silver-tongued deception, Lu Bingcheng, but aren't you just the same? Lu Bingcheng's face turned ashen. This move had truly checkmated him. He couldn't help but look at his mistress. The beautiful young woman clutched her son tighter and quickly shook her head. She wasn't a prostitute. But looking at the others, wasn't every single one of them gazing at him with expectant eyes? Lu Bingcheng took a deep breath and said loudly, "All right, I agree." "No, I don't agree," the beautiful young woman cried out immediately. Lu Bingcheng lowered his voice. "Don't make a scene. I'm just tricking that brat into opening the door. The moment he comes out, I'll have my men take him down. You won't suffer any loss. What kind of man do you think I am? Would I let my own woman be used by another man?" Only then did the beautiful young woman nod. Lu Bingcheng shouted again, "How do we make the trade?" Xiao Ran chuckled. "Have your woman come closer to the wall. Let me get a good look. If she's not pretty enough, I won't be interested in touching her." So, this hole he'd made could not only transmit sound, but also allow him to see through? Lu Bingcheng thought. He looked at his woman. The beautiful young woman handed her son to him and walked towards the metal wall, stopping at the hole, so Xiao Ran could clearly see her face and figure. Xiao Ran knew Lu Bingcheng had just started to speak, when suddenly a door silently slid open in the metal wall. Xiao Ran was seen yanking the beautiful young woman through, holding her firmly. Damn it, this guy never intended to make a deal. His whole roundabout scheme was to get me to hand over the woman myself. Lu Bingcheng was furious, but his 4 bodyguards reacted instantly, rushing forward to attack Xiao Ran. If they could just take down Xiao Ran, not only would they get Lu Bingcheng's mistress back, but the entire villa would also be theirs for the taking. Xiao Ran gave a slight smile, a water gun now in his hand. No one saw how Xiao Ran produced the water gun, but that hardly mattered, because Xiao Ran had already opened fire. Pew pew pew. Streams of water shot out. Arg! Even if the 4 bodyguards were professionals, how could they possibly dodge water pellets? And these weren't just any water pellets. They were melted hailstones, potent and undiluted. How strong was their toxicity? So, the moment the water hit their skin, the pain was unbearable even for the most seasoned bodyguards. They immediately started writhing on the ground, screaming in agony. Anyone else? Xiao Ran dangled the water gun in one hand, while his other gripped the pretty young woman's arm. Her struggles were futile. The difference in strength was just too vast. Lu Bingcheng was dumbfounded. His 4 bodyguards were professionals, yet Xiao Ran had taken them all down with just a water gun. How could he believe it? What could he do? If even professional bodyguards ended up like this, could he really expect disorganized rabble to turn the tables? Impossible. A rabble could only fight when the odds were in their favor. When facing adversity, they'd only drag you down. Lu Bingcheng gritted his teeth, but his expression remained calm. You have a person now. What about the food? This way, he could still pretend he hadn't fallen for Xiao Ran's trick, merely completed a transaction. He was trying to save face as much as possible. Xiao Ran laughed, then looked down and asked, "What's your name?" The woman bit her lip before uttering her name. Wang Lulu. Xiao Ran said, "Oh, Lu Bingcheng has given up on you." Any thoughts on that? This was a devastating psychological blow. Wang Lulu naturally glared at him with resentment and fury. If looks could kill, Xiao Ran would have died many times over. Xiao Ran ignored her and retreated into the villa with Wang Lulu. Swish! The door slid shut automatically, sealing perfectly, leaving no trace. Even a hole from before had closed up, as if it had never existed. Therefore, trying to force Xiao Ran out of the villa with fire, water, or smoke was clearly wishful thinking. Lu Bingcheng's hands clenched into tight fists. He wished Xiao Ran were right in front of him so he could beat him to a pulp, but that was destined to remain a fantasy. However, this also reminded him, there were weapons everywhere outside. The toxic hailstones didn't even need to melt. Merely grazing the skin would cause a burning, searing pain. And if one came into contact with the liquid from the melted toxic hail, the agony would be unbearable, a fate worse than death. Today, Xiao Ran had attacked him with such a weapon. Next time, he too would use the toxic hail. It was so simple, so effective. 4 professional bodyguards, taken down in an instant without a chance to even react. But what Bingcheng couldn't figure out was, with the weather so cold, how had Xiao Ran managed to melt the hailstones? Did he wrap them in a plastic bag and use his body heat? Possible, but he'd be freezing to death himself. Who would melt ice like that? Did he have a death wish? So what method had Xiao Ran used? If the toxic hailstones couldn't be melted, their power would be limited. They'd be no better than ordinary stones for throwing. Then, he couldn't help but think of Lulu. Even with his deep cunning and composure, his face couldn't help but twitch. He was used to being the head of a large company, where everyone treated his every word with utmost respect. Why had he ever been so humiliated, so walked all over? Xiao Ran, you must die. His face turned ashen, his eyes filled with murderous intent. An hour later, with a clack, the iron door opened. Lulu walked out first, followed by Xiao Ran, who was actually carrying a stove. Xiao Ran! Bingcheng gritted his teeth. Looking as if he wanted to bite Xiao Ran to death. Xiao Ran remained unfazed. He put the stove down, added charcoal, then brought out a pot from the room and placed it on the stove. Snap! The electric light flickered on. Inside the pot, red-hot oil was bubbling and ingredients were faintly visible. Heavens, it was hot pot. Everyone saw it and couldn't help but swallow, their mouths watering, an indescribable craving washing over them. We were both hungry and cold. Could anything be more satisfying than a steaming hot pot? This Xiao Ran was too despicable, tempting them like this. Bingcheng, however, didn't even glance at the hot pot. He just snapped at Lulu. Come here. Lulu shivered and walked over. Xiao Ran then brought out platters of meat for dipping and vegetables. He smiled faintly, looking at the crowd. Every face showed immense desire. Want some? He asked lightly. Who wouldn't? But who dared to approach? Never mind the water gun in Xiao Ran's hand. What about this corridor? Poisonous water could spray down at any moment. Xiao Ran was in there too, but he was too close to the iron door. He could dash into the villa in an instant. What would happen to the others then? But the aroma of the hot pot was just too fragrant, too tempting. It made their mouths water uncontrollably. Xiao Ran had already started dipping meat. He dabbed a piece in sauce and took a bite. Oh, so hot, so hot. He almost spat it out, rolling it around in his mouth several times before starting to chew. Fragrant, truly delicious. Xiao Ran swallowed and said to the crowd, It's simple if you want to eat. Each of you kowtow to me, then yell idiot at Bingcheng. This, everyone hesitated. A kowtow wasn't much. What use was dignity these days? Losing face was just losing face. But calling Bingcheng an idiot was different. How could a subordinate curse their leader? Would they still be able to stick together in the future? Bingcheng's brow twitched. Xiao Ran was undermining his authority. If he were humiliated like this, how could he lead others in the future? This would be a black mark on his life's record. He stared at Xiao Ran, wanting to order an attack. But his 4 bodyguards were still lying on the ground, now unconscious, and it was unknown if they would ever wake up. Should he order people into the corridor now? What if Xiao Ran suddenly activated the sprinkler system? The others weren't fools. Who would dare to rush in at a time like this? Why wasn't Xiao Ran eating hot pot somewhere else? Why specifically in that spot? He was banking on the fact that no one would dare to make a move there. This kid wasn't old, so how was he so difficult to deal with? He nearly ground his teeth to dust, forcing the words out. You're just nouveau riche. What's there to be proud of? So what if he won $500 million from the lottery? After taxes, it was only $400 million. What right did he have to compare himself to him, the CEO of a $10 billion corporation? Xiao Ran chuckled. CEO Lu, it seems you also came from a common background, right? You only started your meteoric rise after latching onto your wife's family. So, since neither of us started from scratch, what right do you have to mock me? Besides, if we're comparing wealth now, CEO Lu, you don't seem much different from a pauper, do you? Does everyone want some hot pot? My earlier offer has a time limit. There are 30, 29, 28 seconds left. Hearing him count down, the crowd couldn't help but grow anxious. Only 30 seconds to consider? That was too short. They wanted to eat. They were starving. And there was meat. Finally, someone couldn't hold back any longer. They knelt and kowtowed to Xiao Ran first. Then they whispered, my apologies to Bingcheng and shouted, idiot. Having said that, he boldly walked toward Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran was also in the corridor now, so as long as Xiao Ran sat there, no poisonous water could pour down. Even if he died, he'd die with a full stomach. Can I eat now? The man asked. Xiao Ran made a welcoming gesture. No stools, make do, and eat squatting. How could the man be picky? He quickly grabbed a pair of disposable chopsticks and started eating. He dipped a piece of lamb, fished it out, dabbed it in sauce, and as he put it in his mouth, his brows relaxed in comfort, and tears almost welled up. He thought he'd never get to eat dipped lamb again in his life. Seeing him gobble down the food, the others couldn't sit still either. Someone had taken the lead, so why would everyone else hesitate? My apologies, CEO Lu. Sorry, CEO Lu. Everyone first paid their respects to Lu Bingcheng, then yelled, "Idiot!" kowtowed to Xiao Ran, and hurried over. The group gathered around the stove and began to eat. This was pure bliss. On such a cold day, to eat hot pot around a stove, a mouthful of hot food warming your belly. It was wonderfully comforting. So comfortable, you could even call it happiness. If Xiao Ran tried to recruit them at this moment, not everyone would nod immediately, but at least 9 out of 10 would agree. The remaining one would, at most, hesitate for 3 minutes before nodding. What was most important now? Food, of course, and a hot pot with meat and vegetables at that. Who wouldn't love it? Unfortunately, Xiao Ran had no such intention. To be honest, Lu Bingcheng was also incredibly tempted, but he knew that even if he begged, Xiao Ran wouldn't agree. So, he clung to his last shred of dignity and didn't speak. "Daddy, I'm hungry," a child's voice suddenly rang out. It was too cold outside. The child had been woken by the cold. Lu Bingcheng gritted his teeth and said, "We'll go back and eat instant noodles." "No, I want meat. I want hot pot," the child said, pointing at the stove. Held by Lu Bingcheng, he could see clearly that there was a steaming pot there, with a group of people gathered around, dipping meat. "Eat what?" Lu Bingcheng said angrily. Those people had betrayed him. Was his son going to do the same? "No, I want to eat. I want to eat." The child immediately started crying, clearly a spoiled brat. Lu Bingcheng, agitated, couldn't stop himself from spanking his son's bottom a few times, making the child scream in pain. "Are you crazy? Our son is so young, and he hasn't eaten properly for days. Isn't it normal for him to be craving food?" Wang Lulu quickly snatched their son away, glaring at Lu Bingcheng. Actually, Lu Bingcheng regretted hitting him as soon as he did. He waved his hand, signaling Wang Lulu to take their son further away. Just as he was about to speak, he saw the first person who had gone to Xiao Ran suddenly collapse to the ground, clutching his throat, his face instantly turning ashen. "What's going on?" Everyone was aghast, and all eyes turned to the person who had collapsed. That person was clutching their throat and started vomiting. Gagging sounds, and everything they'd just eaten came spewing out. Ugh, another person collapsed, also vomiting uncontrollably. It was as if a switch had been flipped. Everyone gathered there fell to the ground, one after another, violently throwing up. So the answer was obvious. Xiao Ran. Lu Bingcheng was both furious and horrified. He thought to himself, "Serves you greedy bastards right. This is definitely food poisoning. Did you really think anything from Xiao Ran would come without a price? Now you're reaping what you sowed." But he was also deeply puzzled. Xiao Ran had clearly eaten with them, and he was even the first one. How could he be fine? "Did you poison them?" he yelled. By now, the others had fallen unconscious. Xiao Ran chuckled. "It wasn't exactly poison. I just fed them some apple seeds." Lu Bingcheng froze for a moment. Then his mind raced, and he blurted out, "Cyanide poisoning." Xiao Ran looked surprised, then grinned. "Such a quick reaction. Have you perhaps considered poisoning your own wife a few times? How could you possibly get so many apples?" Lu Bingcheng couldn't figure out. Apple seeds contain cyanide, but to reach a lethal dose for a human, how many would you need? Dozens of pounds? Hundreds of pounds? Given the current situation, how on earth could you get your hands on hundreds of pounds of apples? Xiao Ran smiled faintly. "I bought them a while ago. I'm a law-abiding citizen, you know? I don't go around looting." Was that a jab at him for coming to forcibly occupy the villa? Lu Bingcheng, naturally, didn't blush at this. Instead, he asked, "But why are you okay?" Xiao Ran glanced at the people on the floor. Cyanide is extremely potent. They were already gradually ceasing all movement. He smirked and said, "Because I only sprinkled the powdered apple seeds into their seasonings. To ensure they would definitely use the seasonings, he hadn't put a single grain of salt in a hot pot. So after one bite of the bland food, they naturally, instinctively reached for the seasonings." Realization dawned on Lu Bingcheng, and he couldn't help but say, "You're truly insidious, but your patience is incredible. To think you cored all those apples, extracted the seeds, and ground them up. Why not just use the poison hail?" Xiao Ran shook his head. Even with strong seasonings, the smell of the poison water would be hard to mask. Apple seeds, on the other hand, their scent is easily covered. Of course, The main reason he'd do something like this was that he was too damn bored. What else did he have to do? Besides binge-watching shows, playing cards, and working out every day, he had to find something else to occupy his time. That's why he came up with something as patience-testing as poisoning with apple seeds. Lu Bingcheng stared blankly at Xiao Ran. He simply couldn't imagine the mindset Xiao Ran must have been in to carry out all the prep work. You must have way too much time on your hands. No, it's more like you have way too many supplies. Hundreds of pounds of apples, and you just core them all like it was nothing? Don't you know that these days, even a single fresh apple could get a woman to spend the night with you? Of course, he wouldn't know that Xiao Ran wouldn't waste a thing. The cored apples were tossed into his dimensional space where they wouldn't spoil. He could still eat them later. By this point, everyone who had eaten the hot pot had stopped breathing. The cyanide was too potent. Xiao Ran smiled faintly and walked towards Lu Bingcheng. A chill ran down Lu Bingcheng's spine. Had Xiao Ran actually displayed any exceptional combat prowess? Not at all. At first, he used a water gun to take down Lu Bingcheng's 4 super strong bodyguards. Then, he used the hot pot as bait, letting Lu Bingcheng's men poison themselves, achieving the feat of taking out many with just himself. From start to finish, Xiao Ran had only physically intervened when snatching Wang Lulu. The rest of the time, it was all strategy. Even the weapons he used were the most ordinary, everyday things. Poison hail apples. Such common items. Lu Bingcheng prided himself on his intelligence, yet he had been utterly defeated in this confrontation. Seeing Xiao Ran advance step by step, Lu Bingcheng completely lost his will to fight. So many men couldn't handle Xiao Ran just now. And now it was just him? Oh, right, there was also Wang Lulu and her son. But was he sure those two wouldn't just be a hindrance? His 4 most trusted bodyguards were all lying on the ground, their conditions unknown, but lying in such a cold environment, it was basically a death sentence. So, how could he possibly fight a monster like Xiao Ran? After a glance at his son, he abruptly turned and bolted. He was incredibly fast. Moreover, he switched off his flashlight, making it nearly impossible to find him in the pitch-black garage. But nearly didn't mean absolutely. Xiao Ran smirked. A spatial gate opened, and swish, 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 dozens of bullets poured out. A short, sharp scream echoed, followed by the sound of a heavy thud, and then complete silence. It was as if Xiao Ran was spraying with a machine gun. There was no need to aim. A few were bound to hit, and even a single hit meant death in this frigid environment. Lu Bingcheng deceased. Someone like Motormouth posed no threat, so Xiao Ran could let him live. He could kill him whenever he pleased. But Lu Bingcheng was different. Even with his 4 bodyguards gone, he could still stir up trouble. Anyone who posed a threat had to be eliminated. Pity. With him dead, playing with Wang Lulu might feel a bit less satisfying. Damn, am I becoming a pervert? Xiao Ran couldn't help but reflect. Then he chuckled. In times like these, who wouldn't be a little twisted? Comparatively, he was at most a bit of a Chow Chow type, his level of perversion limited. Then, Xiao Ran looked at Wang Lulu and said, "Come find me when you're hungry from now on." Wang Lulu didn't know whether to be relieved or devastated. Lu Bingcheng had been her protector, but he had abandoned her and her son to flee. She didn't know Lu Bingcheng was actually dead. Could he still be someone she relied on? Looking around, she could see the faint beams of flashlights. Clearly, some neighbors had heard the commotion and come down to spectate. What kind of times were these for people to still have the heart to be curious onlookers? She couldn't fathom what they were thinking. After this battle, Xiao Ran would thoroughly cement his fearsome reputation. No one should dare to oppose him anymore. Wang Lulu, naturally, had no choice but to submit. She asked, "Can I bring my son with me?" Xiao Ran shook his head without hesitation. "I can let you take some food back, but bring the child here?" Hith. What? So the child could watch their transaction? Then Xiao Ran would truly be a pervert. Wang Lulu only wanted her son to have a hot meal, something better to eat. She hadn't thought much further. After being refused, she also felt it was inappropriate. So she nodded to Xiao Ran and hurried away, clutching her son. She still had some water and supplies hidden in her clothes. She needed to get home quickly, lest the people here target her. Xiao Ran, however, just smiled faintly and announced loudly, "I'm laying down a few rules here. First, whoever dares to touch a woman I've set my sights on, I'll kill them. Second, beautiful women who are confident are welcome to trade with me. I can provide food and water." With that said, he turned and went back into the villa. He knew many people were hiding in the shadows, so those words were meant for them. With his current fearsome reputation, who would dare to ignore his words? Of course, Xiao Ran wasn't concerned about Han Yun, Wang Lulu, and the others out of genuine care. If he couldn't guarantee their safety, how else would they come over for his entertainment? He certainly wasn't willing to go out himself. Firstly, it was cold, and secondly, it was unsafe. Even if he was invincible head-on, what if he was ambushed from behind? Better safe than sorry. When it came to safety, one could never be too careful or cautious. What kind of times were these? Was there still law? Still morality? So, he had to be careful himself. Indeed, this battle completely deified Xiao Ran, a god of slaughter. After the cataclysm, how many people had died at Xiao Ran's hands? Dozens. If this wasn't a god of slaughter, a demon, then what was he? But how many people would stop to think if Xiao Ran had killed these individuals without reason? Wrong. Not only was it not without reason, but they were all villains who had tried to invade Xiao Ran's home. Was it wrong to protect oneself, to protect one's home? Others wouldn't see it that way. They would only think of Xiao Ran's ferocity. However, this was precisely the outcome Xiao Ran desired. He didn't need anyone's sympathy, admiration, or love. Fear. That was even better. In a room, Jiang Wan's expression was grim. Even a prominent figure like Lu Bingcheng had been no match for Xiao Ran. How could she possibly get her revenge? Now, even though she controlled a large amount of supplies, could she use them to incite others to help her deal with Xiao Ran? Who would dare? Besides, wouldn't it be easier for them to kill her rather than go after Xiao Ran? The Xiao Ran of today was like an archfiend. Of course, this was all predicated on everyone using cold weapons. If someone could get their hands on a gun, then even the most cowardly person would dare to challenge Xiao Ran. But how to get a gun? This wasn't the States, where guns were everywhere. Unless I can go outside. The police station must be empty by now. Anyone left would have frozen to death. Getting a gun, then would be a piece of cake. She mulled it over seriously. Actually, going out wasn't entirely out of the question. If she wore heavy clothing with a raincoat on top, she could largely prevent contact with the toxins. Then, by holding a table or something similar above her head, she might be able to make a short dash for it. But there was another major problem. The fog was incredibly thick, visibility was extremely low, and one might not even be able to see the signs on buildings. So, getting out would be easy, but getting back, that would be difficult. And it was so cold outside. Simple protection wouldn't last long. The end result would either be getting injured by hailstones and slowly dying from poison, or freezing to death. In fact, a couple of days ago, some people had gone out to find food. Had any of them returned? Yes, only one. But that person had sensed something was wrong right after leaving the residential complex gate and had immediately turned back. Not a single person who had ventured further out of the complex had made it back. Jiang Wan merely considered the tempting idea for a moment before dismissing it. No one would be willing to join her in such a mad endeavor. Wait, could she perhaps cooperate with Lu Bingcheng? Anyone in the complex might submit to Xiao Ran, but Lu Bingcheng absolutely would not. Because if Lu Bingcheng were to surrender, it would mean his death. Therefore, he and Xiao Ran were mortal enemies. It was worth a try. But there was one problem. She didn't know where Lu Bingcheng was. She was still unaware that Lu Bingcheng was already dead. Jiang Wan's eyes glinted with venomous hatred. She blamed Xiao Ran entirely for her shattered family and the deaths of her loved ones. I will kill you, Jiang Wan seethed through gritted teeth, her expression full of malice. Lu Bingcheng was dead. As for Zhang Kuan, he had been brutally violated several more times. After Xiao Ran distributed the promised rewards, he also announced that the bounty on Zhang Kuan was over. He was just a pathetic old man. No one would willingly follow him anymore. What kind of trouble could he possibly stir up? Xiao Ran couldn't even be bothered with him. The next day, Xiao Ran noticed that the number of corpses in the garage decreased by 1 or 2 each day. Who was stealing the bodies? Xiao Ran was curious, so he installed another surveillance camera aimed directly at the corpses. This way, he could also monitor the situation in the garage. Actually, during the house renovations, he had wanted Jia Yungue to install one, but Jia Yungue had insisted that cameras couldn't be installed in public areas. However, after much persuasion from Xiao Ran, a power line had been extended over. So, all Xiao Ran had to do was simple. Just install the camera. Done. He paid it no more mind and went to work out. Today was already the 13th day of the apocalypse. In 2 more days, it would be the anniversary of his death in his previous life. The closer this date approached, the more uneasy he felt, fearing that everything happening now was merely a hallucination, a flashback from his dying moments. What if, in reality, he had still been dismembered by Jiang Wan's family, and it was only his intense hatred and unwillingness to accept his fate that had conjured this false illusion? So, he decided to stop thinking about it altogether and simply indulged in pleasure. In the blink of an eye, 2 days passed. The 15th day of the apocalypse. On this day, he didn't even let Han Yun and the others come over. Instead, he chose to stay alone in his room, dazed, with only Panther for company. Time ticked by. When night fell, he lay in bed, eyes wide open, unable to fall asleep. A night passed. The 16th day of the apocalypse. Xiao Ran woke up. It was still pitch black outside. He first checked the time on his phone. June 16th for 12 a.m. In his previous life, his life had ended on June 15th. So, this was not a dying illusion. It had all truly happened. He was reborn, with his memories and possessing countless supplies. Ha ha ha. Xiao Ran even made a special call to Lu Mei. Hello. Lu Mei's voice sounded rather languid. She was clearly asleep and had been woken by Xiao Ran. Understandable. It was just past 4 a.m. Xiao Ran, you better have a damn good reason, or I swear I'll beat you to death later. Xiao Ran chuckled. I'm not dreaming, am I? You call me on a satellite phone in the middle of the night just to ask if you're dreaming? Lu Mei's voice shot up, her anger likely off the charts. Mimi, who is it? A woman's voice, sweet and cloying, sounded from side, enough to make one's heart stir. Xiao Ran's heart skipped a beat. So this was Lu Mei's close friend, the girl called Yaya? They were actually sleeping together. Could it be some kind of steamy sapphic relationship? Xiao Ran felt an even greater itch in his heart. He truly wished he could teleport through the phone, feast his eyes, and maybe even join in on this battle. Lu Mei was a real stunner. He just wondered if she was a virgin. After being betrayed in his marriage, Xiao Ran was now very particular about whether a woman was a virgin. All right, as long as it's not a dream, you two go back to sleep, Xiao Ran chuckled and decisively hung up. This nearly drove Lu Mei on the other end of the line mad. You call and wake someone up from a dream, say one sentence, and then hang up? You can't mess with people like that. No way. Lu Mei had lost all sleepiness and immediately redialed, only to find she couldn't get through to Xiao Ran's phone. He had already turned it off. Xiao Ran, you bastard. Lu Mei fumed. Day finally broke. Xiao Ran got up, stretched, feeling refreshed and energetic. From the 15th to the 16th, it was as if he had become a completely different person. No longer plagued by anxieties about gains and losses. He had truly been reborn. In this life, he would live it to the fullest, no longer bound by any restrictions. I'll do whatever I damn well please. Who's going to stop me? A wicked grin spread across Xiao Ran's lips. What to do today? Xiao Ran couldn't help but think of his ex-wife. Since the 15th had passed, he should also let go of the unresolved feelings from his past life. Time to arrange for her death. Xiao Ran had no intention of going out himself. Instead, he grabbed a microphone, connected it to a speaker, opened the window, and cranked the volume to the max. Dear neighbors, there's now a bounty on someone named Jiang Wan. Anyone who captures her alive and brings her to me will receive 2 boxes of instant noodles or an equivalent amount of food. With that said, he quickly closed the window. The cold wind blowing and was freezing. He acted as if nothing had happened, but the entire residential complex was in an uproar. You see, the longer it had been since the apocalypse began, the more severe the shortages of food and clean water became. Compared to the first or second day of the apocalypse, how much more valuable were 2 boxes of instant noodles today? It was safe to say this amount of food was enough to drive people mad. In a room within the complex, Jiang Wan paced back and forth, her expression extremely grim. She finally knew now that Bingcheng was dead. Thus, she had one less potential ally. This realization filled her with both bitterness and despair. However, the announcement that had just echoed through the complex sent a chill down her spine and threw her into a state of agitation. As the saying goes, a hefty reward is sure to attract daredevils. She wasn't Bingcheng, who would be wary of her. Therefore, anyone could make a move on her next. Who could she still trust? She paced back and bumped unexpectedly into someone. It was Lu Can. Jiang Wan glanced over, and her heart tightened. She saw Lu Can holding a kitchen cleaver, his face murderous, his mouth open as if about to speak. In that instant, she had only one thought: strike first to gain the upper hand. So, she immediately swung the fruit knife in her hand. Schlick! Lu Can didn't resist at all, seemingly completely caught off guard. His throat was instantly slit, and blood spurted out like a fountain. He stared blankly at Jiang Wan, his face filled with confusion, as if he never expected her to attack him. A vicious glint flashed in Jiang Wan's eyes. You were going to be cruel, so don't blame me for being ruthless. Thinking of capturing me to claim Xiao Ran's reward? Just then, Two more men rushed in and were stunned by the scene. Jiang Wan quickly explained, "It was Lu Can. He wanted to capture me and take me to Xiao Ran for the reward. Don't misunderstand. These two were helpers she had recruited in the last few days. So, if they misunderstood and thought she had harmed an ally, their small group would immediately fall apart." The two men were Luo Hu and Duan Jingtai. Duan Jingtai was Lin Lin's husband, the guy with the big mouth. They looked at the corpse on the floor, then up at Jiang Wan, strange smiles appearing on their faces. Ha ha ha! The two suddenly burst out laughing, bending over forwards and backwards as if they had encountered the funniest thing in the world. Jiang Wan was baffled by their laughter and couldn't help asking, "What are you laughing at?" "Laughing at what a complete idiot you are," Luo Hu sneered. "The two of us were just secretly discussing sending you over to Xiao Ran. We didn't expect this guy, Lu Can, to overhear us, so we chased after him to silence him. We didn't think he'd actually make it to you, but who would have thought that Jiang Wan would personally kill the only one who was on her side? How ironic and laughable. Originally, with Lu Can's help, Jiang Wan might have had a fighting chance. It would have been 2 against 2. Even though Jiang Wan was a woman, in a desperate fight, she wouldn't have been without a chance of winning. Moreover, Luo Hu and Duan Jingtai would have had to consider, what if they won but suffered heavy losses? Would it still be worth it then? But now? Jiang Wan couldn't stop her body from trembling. She had actually destroyed her own lifeline. Now, how could she, a weak woman, fight against 2 grown men? Why had she been so impulsive? Why didn't she let Lu Can speak? He clearly wanted to say something, but she was too anxious, too scared, too eager to strike first. No, she shouldn't blame herself. It was Lu Can's fault. He clearly could have spoken as soon as he came in. Why did he have to make her misunderstand? In that kind of situation, anyone would have reacted the same way, right? Naturally, she wouldn't blame herself. Instead, she shifted the blame onto Lu Can and stopped thinking about it. She waved the fruit knife in her hand and shouted, "Don't come any closer. Stay away." Luo Hu and Duan Jingtai just sneered. If Lu Can were still around, they might indeed have hesitated. But just Jiang Wan, a lone woman? The 2 men fanned out, approaching her from both the left and the right. Xiao Ran opened the door and saw Han Yun and the others off. A little while later, the doorbell to the basement suddenly rang. Xiao Ran checked the security monitor. There were 3 people in total, 2 of whom he recognized. One was Lin Lin's husband, that trash-talking guy. The other was his ex-wife, Jiang Wan. However, she was in bad shape. Her hands were tied, her face was bruised in several places, and her expression was filled with venomous hatred. That was quick. A smirk touched Xiao Ran's lips as he readily opened the door. If this was a trap, if the loudmouth and his companion intended to use this chance to trick him into opening the door and overpower him, they would only end up being mercilessly devoured by the spatial gate. However, the loudmouth was all fawning smiles, bowing and scraping in an utterly obsequious manner. Xiao Ran couldn't help but sigh. This man had truly lost all spine. To still greet him with a smile after Xiao Ran had had his way with his wife. It was clear he had surrendered from the depths of his soul. How utterly boring. He pointed to the 2 boxes of instant noodles just inside the door. "Take them." The loudmouth and his companion were overjoyed. They first pushed Jiang Wan inside, then each grabbed a box of instant noodles and fled. Xiao Ran pressed the remote, closing the iron gate, then looked coolly at his ex-wife. Jiang Wan forced down her venomous expression, squeezing out a smile. "Xiao Ran, there have been so many misunderstandings between us." Xiao Ran raised a hand, cutting her off. "What do you think of this place?" he asked. Jiang Wan looked bewildered. After a few seconds, she stammered, It's wonderful. This place is amazing. How could it not be? Just the fact that it had heating and electricity would make any former superstar or socialite grovel to be taken in by Xiao Ran, wouldn't it? She finally understood what all Xiao Ran's 2 months of villa renovations had been for. Xiao Ran smiled and nudged her upstairs. When they reached the next floor, Jiang Wan's eyes immediately fell upon the roaring fireplace. It was clearly much warmer here, so much so that she began to sweat in her thick winter clothes. Her hands were bound, so she couldn't remove any layers. Xiao Ran had no intention of helping her. The leopard padded over, fixing Jiang Wan with hostile eyes and letting out a low growl. If not for Xiao Ran's silent command, it would have undoubtedly pounced. Jiang Wan trembled. A barking dog rarely bites, but this leopard was clearly a vicious beast. Xiao Ran, however, produced a plate with a cooked steak on it and placed it before the leopard. "Eat." The leopard didn't touch it, its gaze still locked on Jiang Wan. In its simple mind, Jiang Wan was an enemy. With an enemy in the house, how could it possibly eat? It had to protect its master, guard its territory. You're actually feeding a dog steak? Jiang Wan was aghast, scarcely believing her eyes. What were people eating these days? Instant noodles, crackers, bread. Only families with ample stores had white rice. Meat? Please. Who stockpiled fresh meat? Even cured meats weren't something every household prepared. So, you're extravagant enough to feed steak to a dog? Aren't you afraid of being cursed to death by everyone? Xiao Ran gave a faint smile and sat down at the dining table, which was already laden with food. King crab, river prawns, lamb soup, braised beef. It was a lavish spread. You're going to eat all this by yourself? Aren't you afraid you'll burst? What a waste. Such an utter waste. Envious. Xiao Ran asked. Jiang Wan nodded instinctively. The hatred in her eyes as she looked at Xiao Ran began to fade, replaced by an intense yearning. Hubby, let's start over, please. Ha ha ha. Xiao Ran roared with laughter, thick with mockery. Let me show you something. He turned on the television, fiddled with it for a moment, and an image flickered onto the screen. It was Han Yun and her sister-in-law, along with Zhong Lei and Wang Lulu, filmed just that afternoon by a hidden camera, an 8K Ultra HD one. The image quality was superb, allowing Jiang Wan to see every feature, every minute detail. Han Yun and Wang Lulu were breathtakingly beautiful. Their figures, even Jiang Wan, who considered herself attractive, had to concede defeat before these two. Yet even such exquisite women could only kneel and serve Xiao Ran humbly. Her face drained of color. If Xiao Ran was already amusing himself with such prime specimens, would he even look twice at her? Xiao Ran, what deep hatred do we share for you to treat me like this? She shrieked, suddenly hysterical. All pretense of meekness vanished, replaced by a fierce glare. Her last shred of hope was gone. Xiao Ran scoffed. You still have the gall to question me. Indeed, he thought, a viperous woman is always a viperous woman, never capable of self-reflection. However, I have no intention of arguing with you. I'm showing you these things merely to let you know how well I'm living, to make you regret, to make you jealous, to make you burn with resentment. Scold you to your senses? Make you weep and repent? Heh, that's for you to do in the underworld. All I'm doing is sending you there. Xiao Ran smiled and pushed Jiang Wan towards the main gate. Terror bleached Jiang Wan's face as she realized his intentions. Utterly panicked, she screamed, Xiao Ran, what are you doing? What are you trying to do? No, no, no. Xiao Ran remained completely unmoved. He opened the gate, a smile playing on his lips. Thwack! He kicked Jiang Wan out. Whether in our past life or this one, goodbye. Bang! He slammed the gate shut without a moment's hesitation. Jiang Wan scrambled to get back, but a hailstone struck her squarely in the face. The hailstones weren't as large as before, but they were still marble-sized, and a direct hit was agonizing. Critically, the hail was toxic. Even a graze on the skin brought a searing, raw pain. She screamed, desperate to find shelter, but more hailstones rained down relentlessly. Her screams became continuous as the unbearable assault continued. She collapsed, writhing on the ground in agony. Xiao Ran, save me, save me, she cried out to the only person who could possibly help, but her voice grew fainter and fainter, eventually dying away. Then, she moved no more. It wasn't the toxin that killed her. Mere skin contact wouldn't act so fast. It was the extreme cold. Xiao Ran watched from the window, his face a blank mask. Just as he'd intended, Jiang Wan was dead. The grudges of past and present lives were settled. He could finally let it go. Xiao Ran turned away, feeling exceptionally light. Firstly, the 15-day period had passed, proving he had truly been reborn. Secondly, the last member of the Zheng family was dead. The knot in his heart was finally undone. From now on, he could simply enjoy life as he pleased. Humming a tune, he began his workout. That was one thing he couldn't neglect. After finishing, he showered and started reviewing the surveillance footage, the new camera in the garage. He skimmed through the footage and soon spotted another missing body. Rewinding, he identified the corpse thieves, several large men carrying a body, quickly vanishing into the darkness. Lu Yang from Building 4. Xiao Ran recognized one of them. So, has the entire Building 4 started resorting to cannibalism? He felt a shiver. Lu Yang and his group were stealing bodies frequently, almost one every 2 days. An adult weighed well over 100 pounds. How could a few people consume that much in 2 days? It had to be the entire building. A chill ran down Xiao Ran's spine at the thought. What a world this had become. Another night passed. Day 17 of the apocalypse. Xiao Ran woke up, his mood instantly lifting, because every day was a brand new day for him now. He looked out the window, in surprise. The once gloomy, oppressive view outside had noticeably brightened. The fog had lifted. Xiao Ran couldn't help but feel excited. He dashed to the window. Sure enough, visibility had improved to about 20 meters. Although it was still far from completely clear, venturing out in these conditions meant he wouldn't have to worry about getting lost anymore. He could finally go out. Xiao Ran's heart leaped. He'd been cooped up in the residential complex for over half a month. Even with daily female companionship, it wasn't like that was all one could do besides eat and sleep. So he was still quite bored. After all, being forced to be a shut-in was completely different from choosing to be one. It was time to go out and explore. Most importantly, he needed to get some fuel, like gasoline, diesel, that sort of thing. Before the apocalypse, it was impossible to stockpile large quantities. Lume's best friend was a different story. She must have had powerful connections. Otherwise, how could she get approval for several acres of land just like that to build an apocalyptic fortress? With money and power, getting extra diesel and gasoline wouldn't be hard for her, right? Never mind, it didn't matter. It wasn't too late for some zero-cost shopping now. Xiao Ran smiled. His G-Wagon had only cost him over $2 million, but the modifications ran over $5 million. The windows were replaced with bulletproof glass. The tires were anti-skid. The body offered excellent insulation. The heating system was custom-made, and the vehicle's overall defense capabilities were extremely strong. After waiting so many days, it finally had a chance to shine. He just hoped the roads outside weren't blocked. That was a major concern, because when the hail started, the morning rush hour hadn't ended. So, there were many cars on the streets. Many vehicles surely hadn't found shelter in time and had their windows smashed. Add the dense fog to that. How many people would have simply abandoned their cars on the road? At this moment, Xiao Ran really wished he had prepared tank. The only good news was that the nearest gas station was only about 2 kilometers away from the complex. It shouldn't be too difficult, right? Xiao Ran got ready. Time to go. Leopard, I can't take you this time. You be a good boy and watch the house. Leopard barked, woof, woof. It was unclear if he understood. Xiao Ran went to the ground-level garage. The villa's garage was on the ground level. Of course, the basement could also be converted into a garage, depending on the owner's choice. Xiao Ran, for instance, had converted his basement into a living area and a surveillance room to maximize space. He got in the car, closed the door. Vroom. The engine started, and the G-Wagon slowly drove out of the garage. Hail immediately pelted the roof, making crisp thudding sounds. Xiao Ran smiled faintly, not worried at all. Even ordinary cars usually didn't have to worry about their roofs being smashed in, unless they were so shoddily made they were filled with foam. So, of course, Xiao Ran's modified and reinforced luxury vehicle had even less to fear. Of course, hail also hit the windows, and that was the real test. But the G-Wagon's windows weren't just bulletproof. They could even raise a steel mesh screen to completely block out the hail. Solid as a rock. The ground was already frozen solid and incredibly slippery, but with its anti-skid tires, the G-Wagon still drove steadily. Xiao Ran remained very cautious, keeping his speed around 20 km/h. Was there any need to rush now? The G-Wagon drove through the residential complex and soon reached the main gate. Naturally, the sensor system was long dead, so the barrier arm wouldn't lift. No problem. I'll just ram it. Xiao Ran slammed on the gas. Bang! The vehicle smashed right through. It was equipped with a bull bar, the highest quality kind, and with its modified engine, forget a mere barrier arm. It could probably knock down a wall. However, Xiao Ran made no effort to hide his departure. With visibility now around 20 meters, many people naturally saw him. Who's that? Must be Xiao Ran. I saw that car come out of one of the villas. How dare that guy go out? Isn't he afraid the hail will smash his windows? Yeah, the fog has lifted today, but the hail hasn't stopped. Maybe we should try our luck outside too, right? We can cover the car windows with quilts, just leave a small slit to see through. If we drive slowly and carefully, it shouldn't be too hard to get out. Yes. We have to take the risk, or we'll really starve or die of thirst. Many people mustered their courage and rushed to the underground parking garage. However, many others were still too scared, or didn't have cars, mostly the elderly. Though they also went to the underground garage, they were discussing other matters. Instead of risking their lives out there, why not try to benefit without taking risks? Xiao Ran paid no mind to the others. He drove on. Though his speed wasn't fast, he had truly left the residential complex. He felt like a hidden dragon emerging from the sea. Awesome. And Xiao Ran's luck was pretty good. Although the streets were indeed littered with haphazardly stopped vehicles, he could mostly maneuver around them. There was only one spot where it was truly impossible. 3 cars had crashed together, completely blocking the road. No problem. He rolled down the window, opened an umbrella to shield himself, then reached out and touched one of the cars. Instantly, that car vanished. It went into his dimensional space. Moving one car was enough. Xiao Ran closed the umbrella, rolled up the window, and continued on. It was only about 2 kilometers, and he soon arrived at the gas station. He parked the G-Wagon, got out, locked it, and went straight to where the storage tanks were. If he was going to take some, he might as well take it all. One by one, he stored the fuel tanks into his dimensional space. There were 3 tanks in total for 92-octane gasoline, 98-octane gasoline, and diesel. The absence of 95-octane gasoline annoyed Xiao Ran slightly. Same trip, but 1 less tank of fuel. Fortunately, each tank was almost full. It seemed they had been refilled just before the apocalypse. Phew, not bad at all. Xiao Ran, holding his umbrella, was about to return to his car when he suddenly saw several vehicles swerving erratically towards him. They nearly crashed into his G-Wagon, and what made Xiao Ran frown was that these cars then surrounded it. Just then, a number of people jumped out of the cars. They were clearly here for gas and rushed to grab the fuel nozzles. However, the power was out, so the pumps wouldn't work. Secondly, Xiao Ran had already taken the storage tanks, so naturally, no fuel would come out anyway. The roof of the gas station was rainproof, so it also blocked the hail, but it offered no protection from cold. These people were all shivering, hugging themselves, with hats on their heads and cloth covering their faces, making them unrecognizable. They, of course, also saw Xiao Ran and immediately fixed their gazes on his clothes. It was a custom-made mountaineering jacket, the kind you could use to climb Mount Everest, so its insulation was top-notch. Even if they didn't recognize its quality, one glance was enough to tell it was high-end gear. "Hey, if you don't want us to beat you to death, take off your clothes," one of them shouted at Xiao Ran, brandishing a club in his hand. Xiao Ran frowned. "It's freezing. If I take off my clothes, what if I freeze to death?" "Huh. Whether you freeze to death or not, what's that got to do with us?" said the man who had spoken earlier. He seemed to be the leader of the group. Only he was talking, while the others sneered, brandishing clubs or kitchen knives, their expressions clearly saying, "If you don't do as you're told, we'll bash you or chop you up." Xiao Ran shook his head. See, he wasn't a bloodthirsty person, but people just kept pushing him. He chuckled, reached into his pocket, and then pulled out a replica gun from his dimensional space. What? Instantly, the gang's pupils contracted. They tensed up, involuntarily stepping back. A gun? Who wouldn't be scared of a gun? "Cocky, are you?" "Go on, keep being cocky," Xiao Ran said coolly. "Now, all of you, run toward the road. Whoever is last, I'll shoot him dead." The group gasped in unison. "We'll be killed by the hail," they cried out together. This hail was highly toxic. Getting hit brought 2 kinds of pain, and the agony from the toxins was unbearable, enough to make someone writhe on the ground. Xiao Ran scoffed. "What's that got to do with me?" He threw their own words back at them. The thugs exchanged glances, their eyes glinting menacingly. "If it's come to this, then let's fight to the bitter end. You're just one man with 1 gun, but there are 11 of us. How many can you possibly kill? Let's get him!" They all roared, charging at Xiao Ran. After the apocalypse began, many people had become ruthless, and now it was a kill-or-be-killed world, so naturally, everyone fought desperately. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. "I was worried you wouldn't charge. This way, I could save some bullets." He opened the spatial gate. Those charging at the front vanished instantly. Even those a few steps behind, who noticed something was wrong, couldn't stop their momentum and plunged headfirst into the spatial gate. Only one person was spared. He had been too slow. The man trembled, his face a mask of terror. "Don't kill me. Please spare me." He had completely lost the will to resist. Xiao Ran shook his head. "You know my secret. I have to kill you to silence you." The man felt incredibly wronged, tears welling up. "But I don't know anything." He had only seen people disappear without understanding how. How could he know Xiao Ran's secret? "You're going to silence me just for this? Isn't that too much?" Xiao Ran smiled. A bullet silently flew out from the dimensional space. P4.I. A bloom of blood instantly appeared on the man's forehead. He stared at Xiao Ran with resentment as he fell backward. Thump! He hit the ground, dying with his eyes wide open. Xiao Ran waved his hand, and the cars blocking his G-Wagon in front and behind were stowed away. He then opened the car door and got in. A strong wave of warmth immediately enveloped him. He hadn't turned off the engine. The AC was still running. Save this little bit of fuel? Do I look like someone who's short on cash? Home. Xiao Ran didn't know if this fog would continue to dissipate or thicken again. He no longer had any foresight, so safety was naturally the top priority. He had stockpiled so many supplies and made ample preparations. If he got trapped outside by the fog, unable to return home, or even froze to death, wouldn't that be a joke? Safety first. That was the rule. He drove carefully. Since he had cleared the road on his way, the return trip was easy. He soon saw the main gate of his residential complex. But he found that although he had broken the barrier gate to the complex, several stone bollards had now suddenly appeared, blocking the road. And in the security booth, a dozen or so elderly people were sitting. Upon seeing Xiao Ran return, they all showed expressions of excitement. Xiao Ran rolled down his window a bit and asked, "What's the meaning of this?" "Xiao Ran, we're all about to starve and die of thirst. So you must give us food and water, or we won't let you into the complex," one of the old men said, opening a window. Although the security booth had a roof, protecting them from the hail, it offered no defense against the wind or cold. As soon as the window opened, a chilling gust swept in, making the dozen or so old folks shiver uncontrollably. Xiao Ran chuckled. "Aren't you afraid I'll get rough?" "Hee, we're not stupid." The old folks then, surprisingly, all took out toy water guns and aimed them at Xiao Ran. These were the most common type of squeeze-trigger water guns, holding only a single tube's worth, with a range of just 3 to 5 meters. But if Xiao Ran got out of his car to move the bollards or enter the complex directly, they could spray him. It was obvious that these water guns weren't filled with ordinary water, but with water melted from the toxic hail. Xiao Ran smiled. In this freezing weather, if he just stalled for a bit, the toxic water in the guns would naturally freeze. How could they squeeze out a tube of ice? However, he had no interest in wasting time with these old geezers here. He slammed on the accelerator, and the car surged forward. The bull bar hit the stone bollards first. The powerful engine pushed the two bollards forward. They couldn't stop the car's advance at all. Then, Xiao Ran reversed a little, adjusted his direction, and got past the bollards. However, he didn't just drive off. Instead, he took out 2 packs of instant noodles and tossed them towards the people in the security booth. The old folks were initially extremely disappointed because Xiao Ran was too unyielding, simply ramming through their blockade with his car. Did they expect him to let them try to extort him by standing in front of the car? Given how ruthless people are nowadays, he would have just floored it and run them over. But then, Xiao Ran actually threw out 2 packs of instant noodles. At this, the old folks couldn't hold back any longer. They surged out of the security booth like a tide, scrambling for the 2 packs of instant noodles. Don't be fooled by their usual frail appearance, always demanding seats on the bus. Faced with the temptation of 2 packs of instant noodles, they all erupted with astonishing strength, pouncing like starving wolves, utterly ferocious. A punch here, a kick there, that was one thing. But some of the old geezers fought dirty, aiming for low blows. Arg! Instantly, a chorus of screams and muffled groans arose. Xiao Ran watched this farce through his car window, a faint smile playing on his lips. See, the alliance they just formed has already fallen apart. This is human nature. Human nature crumbles under pressure, revealing its true colors when faced with self-interest or matters of life and death. The old folks were brawling fiercely. They'd probably end up bashing each other's brains out. Xiao Ran had no interest in watching any longer. He started the engine and drove away. After parking the car, Xiao Ran took off his coat. Leopard came up to greet him, tail wagging. He patted the leopard's head. Xiao Ran glanced at the time. It was 3 minutes to 11. He and Leopard ate first. After the meal, he had some fruit, and after the fruit, he brewed a cup of goji berry tea. Couldn't be helped. He was expending so much energy every day. One had to learn to take care of oneself. A little while later, Han Yun and the other 3 women arrived on time. Xiao Ran was quite pleased and treated the 4 women to watermelon. Each received 2 slices, a decent amount but not too much. The 4 women, naturally, ate with delight. For Xiao Ran, resources were a trivial matter. He had an abundance, far too much. Take watermelons, for example. He had several thousand tons. Even if he ate one a day, how long would that last him? But for the 4 women, any fruit was now a luxury. Moreover, despite the freezing weather outside, they were in a warm room, sweating from eating hot pot, and then biting into refreshingly cold watermelon. What kind of bliss was this? Even gods wouldn't have it better. Could they ever leave Xiao Ran now? Even if Xiao Ran demanded they become his slaves, they would obey meekly. In these times, whoever controlled the resources was the boss. Of course, one also needed the ability to protect those resources, otherwise they'd just be easy prey. As it happened, Xiao Ran possessed both. If he wished, he could easily become the master of the entire residential complex. But what was the point? To gather a bunch of underlings just to fight? Would large-scale wars even break out in these times? How would anyone even get around? No, more accurately, in a few more days, most people would starve to death. With the global population drastically reduced, how could there possibly be large-scale wars? So, for small-scale skirmishes, Xiao Ran's spatial gate was the ultimate weapon. A single burst of bullets fired through it. Who could possibly withstand that? The four women ate the watermelon down to the rind, leaving almost no red flesh, looking as if they hadn't had nearly enough. It wasn't that Xiao Ran was stingy, but if he let them eat their fill all at once, they wouldn't appreciate it as much. Now, there was food to eat, but they only got a little each time. Naturally, they would cherish it more and try harder to please Xiao Ran. It was the old saying, a small kindness earns gratitude, but too much generosity breeds resentment. After the watermelon, Xiao Ran saw the four reluctant women out. In the afternoon, cursing and swearing could be heard from many households, because those old scoundrels at the entrance had beaten and frozen several people to death while fighting over instant noodles. When Xiao Ran found out, he merely smiled faintly. As long as they didn't provoke him, he couldn't be bothered to intervene. But if they insisted on crossing him, then they could all go to hell. My life is what matters most. However, Xiao Ran glanced towards Building 4. The people in that building had started resorting to cannibalism. Once that line was crossed, they were capable of anything. He'd have to be wary of them. He wasn't afraid of overt threats, but of covert ones. As evening approached, a thick fog suddenly rolled in from nowhere, instantly blanketing the entire city. Visibility dropped from 20 meters to 10, then 5, and finally, just like the other day, it was down to barely 1 meter. Now, those who had ventured out to scavenge for supplies were in deep trouble. Those who had returned early were fine, but anyone still out there definitely wouldn't make it back. With the weather so cold, if they didn't find shelter in time, the chances of freezing to death were extremely high. Xiao Ran couldn't help but TSK. Luckily, he hadn't been greedy and had returned early. Otherwise, he'd be spending tonight outside. Although his car was modified with excellent insulation, and he had the best windproof jacket, sleeping in the car was, first, uncomfortable, and second, unsafe. Who knew what accident might happen in the middle of the night? In the apocalypse, one had to be careful about everything. Safety first. Building 4. In one room, 7 men were drinking soup, each with a large bowl. They ate ravenously, sweat even beading on their foreheads. They were the organizers and managers of Building 4. The residents of Building 4 were now tightly united, even living together to maximize warmth. Sun Wintao finished first. He put down his bowl and chopsticks and said, "We don't have to worry about food for now, but our clean water is running out. We won't have enough for the next meal." Lu Yong finished second. Wiping his mouth with a tissue, he said, "That's simple. Quite a few people probably went out scavenging today. We could just pick a building and raid it. We'll not only get enough clean water, but also some extra supplies." "Good idea. I'm getting damn sick of eating meat every day," Lu Wei said. "All right, we'll move out a bit later tonight. Whether our wives, children, and parents get to eat something decent depends on what we bring back tonight," Lu Yong declared. "Which building should we choose?" "We're in Building 4. The closest ones are Building 3 and Building 5. Which one do you guys want?" "Building 3. Building 3. Building 5. Okay, most votes are for Building 3. Tonight, we hit Building 3. Actually, that villa is the best target." Ma Junkai suddenly interjected. The others thought about it and nodded in agreement. "It's just that Xiao Ran is tough to deal with." "Yeah, who knows if he's skilled or just lucky. He actually killed so many people with a toy water gun. Forget it. Whether he's truly capable or just lucky, let's not mess with him for now. Yeah, there's something unsettling about him." Midnight, Lu Yang's group, 30 men in total, set out fully equipped. They first went to the underground garage, then entered Building 3. Bang! With one strike of a heavy hammer, the door was smashed open. A mob of burly men surged in. Who could stop them? Immediately, piercing screams echoed out. After a short while, Lu Yong and his men withdrew and moved on to the next apartment. Bang! Same as before, one blow from the hammer smashed the door open, and the group flooded in. Only this time, they stayed for a very long time, and women's screams could be heard continuously from inside the room, stopping for a bit only to resume. A full 2 hours later, they finally began to emerge one by one. Didn't expect Zhao Jiai's wife to be so pretty. Tell the guys to go easy on her. Don't break her or kill her from playing too rough. We can take her back and have our fun slowly. Right. The rest of you guys, hold back for now. There are definitely other beauties in Building 3. Don't be hasty. They continued smashing doors. Day 18 of the apocalypse. Early in the morning, people were rushing about, spreading the news and denouncing the atrocities committed by Building for the previous day. They had launched a surprise attack on Building 3. Overnight, they assaulted most of the building's residents, killing almost everyone. Only a few beautiful women were spared, taken back to Building 4. Among the residents they had visited, some, in their desperate scramble for survival, had hidden in the underground parking garage. They used its darkness and freezing cold to deter their pursuers, thus narrowly escaping death. Even so, by the next morning, more than half of these survivors had perished. The news came directly from their lips. Upon hearing this, the entire residential complex was thrown into shock, and countless people voiced their condemnation. Coordinated by the leaders of the various buildings, most of the complex's homeowners gathered in the parking garage for a meeting. Of course, no one from Building 4 participated, as the sole topic of discussion today was how to deal with Building 4. They had gone too far. Xiao Ran had killed people before, too. But anyone who wasn't a fool could see clearly that it was always others who provoked Xiao Ran first, and only then did he retaliate. Conversely, if you didn't provoke Xiao Ran, who got bullied? Who died? No one. So, naturally, everyone was afraid of Xiao Ran. After all, he had killed, and quite a few at that. However, people didn't feel true terror, because as long as they didn't mess with him, they knew they wouldn't be in danger. But Building 4 was different. Even if you didn't provoke them, they would still come after you. They'd eat your flesh, drink your blood, and violate your wives and daughters. They were like a pack of deranged cultists who wouldn't be terrified. Therefore, everyone had to come up with a plan. Xiao Ran, naturally, didn't participate. The first thing he did upon waking was to look out the window. He saw that the thick fog had dispersed considerably. Although visibility wasn't as good as yesterday, he could still see about 15 meters. This meant it was still possible to go out and search for supplies. He had just acquired 3 large cans of gasoline and diesel yesterday, so he wasn't in a hurry to venture out again today. Around noon, Han Yun and the other 3 women came over. They told Xiao Ran what Building 4 had done, each of them wearing expressions clouded with worry. Because who knew if that gang from Building 4 wouldn't smash down their doors at night and do whatever they pleased. Among them, even Zhang Jingya and Zhong Lei, who were somewhat less stunning, were at least 7 out of 10 beauties. Han Yun and Wang Lulu, however, were top tier, easily 9 out of 10 or higher. If they fell into the hands of those fiends from Building 4, the outcome would be unimaginably tragic. Although they were currently selling themselves, Xiao Ran was reasonable. He wasn't just using them for free. On the contrary, they had plenty of good food, heating, and hot showers. It was like being kept women by a rich man in the past. Though the term sounded crude, they were, in fact, living a life far superior to most. But if they ended up in Building 4, they'd be ravaged, tortured, and might even end up as food. With such fears, how could their delicate brows not be furrowed, their hearts not heavy with anxiety? Xiao Ran listened as they described Building 4's atrocities. And although the entire complex had organized a meeting, in the end, there was no unity, and they failed to come up with any concrete plan. So, the meeting was essentially a waste of time. Everyone had just shivered in the parking garage for nothing. Indeed, once people started eating human flesh, they had completely abandoned all morality, were no longer bound by any social order, and had utterly lost any sense of right and wrong in their eyes. Only survival remained. In fact, such a mindset did indeed make it easier to survive in the apocalypse. However, living near a pack of beasts, predators who had already tasted blood, even Xiao Ran felt a prickling unease, as if needles were pressed against his back. He certainly wasn't afraid of these thugs himself, but if Building 4 targeted Han Yun and the others, not a single one of them would escape. Xiao Ran wasn't tired of them yet, so naturally, he didn't want Han Yun and the others to be snatched away by that gang from Building 4 and become their playthings. Besides, once Building 4 finished eliminating everyone else in the complex, the trouble would eventually reach his doorstep. Since they were destined to be enemies, why not take the initiative and eliminate them sooner rather than later? Xiao Ran mulled it over. His guiding principle was always caution. Therefore, even if he made a move, he had to guarantee his own 100% safety. Anything less, even 99%, would be irresponsible toward himself. I've got it. He nodded to himself. While this plan couldn't guarantee killing everyone in Building 4, it could at least prevent them from causing trouble for a short while, and ultimately, more than half of them would likely die. So, he said, all of you stay here for the next few days. You can go back once the Building 4 problem is resolved. The four women were naturally overjoyed. However, Lulu quickly asked, "Then, can I bring my son over?" Xiao Ran shook his head. Of course not. Lulu couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. She stood there, stunned and hesitant, torn between coming over by herself or staying home with her son. It was a difficult decision. Finally, she decided to come alone and entrust her son to her neighbors, an elderly couple who were very kind. She believed that if she gave them some food, the old couple would take good care of her son. This was a choice born of harsh reality. After all, she wasn't overwhelmingly fond of her son. He had merely been a means to improve her own standing. When weighed against her own well-being, the decision was quite straightforward. After eating, she left with some food, returning about an hour later. As evening approached, the thick fog rolled in again. Visibility dropped back to about 1 meter. This made Xiao Ran wonder if, from now on, the fog would always disperse somewhat during the day, only to recondense at night. If that was the case, anyone who couldn't make it back before evening would have to spend the night wherever they were and wait until the next morning, when the fog cleared, to move or return home. Xiao Ran checked the time and decided it was time to act. He first checked the surveillance monitors, then slipped out. Han Yun and the other 3 women were fast asleep. None of them stirred. Xiao Ran had added a bit of sleeping powder to their dinner, ensuring they slept soundly so they wouldn't notice him leaving in the middle of the night. A biting chill struck him, jolting Xiao Ran fully awake. It was truly frigid. Even though he was fully bundled up, he could still feel a bone-deep cold. At night, the temperature probably dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius or even lower. Xiao Ran used his flashlight to light the way and soon arrived at Building 4. He went up the stairs to the 2nd floor. In this residential complex, the ground floor of each building was mostly open air, meaning no residents lived there. It was used for parking electric bikes and for delivery lockers. Xiao Ran stood behind the fire escape door. With a thought, he materialized large, square blocks of ice. Why would he prepare ice blocks? It was already an ice age, after all. It was because Xiao Ran worried about abnormal weather. This year was extremely cold, but what if next year turned extremely hot? Besides, his interdimensional space was large enough. Ice blocks weren't valuable. And what's more, ice was just water. Melted, it could be used for drinking and bathing. Soon, he had laid a thick layer, about a meter high. He took out rebar, inserted it between the ice blocks, propping them up almost to the ceiling. Then, he started pouring water to fill the gaps between the ice blocks and between the ice and the rebar. How cold was it now? 30 or 40 degrees below zero. The water froze instantly as soon as it was poured. Thus, the ice blocks and rebar fused together completely. He laid more ice blocks, all the way to the ceiling. This part was a bit trickier. He took out a ladder, climbed up, and continued pouring water on the ice. Just like that, an ice wall, reinforced with rebar, was bricked into place. The fire escape door opened inwards towards the ice wall. But now, could it still be opened? They'd have to push an entire wall. And even if they managed to chop through the fire escape door with an axe, how much effort and time would it take to break through such a thick ice wall, reinforced with rebar? Perhaps 10 days, or even half a month. Starving them for that long. Most of them would probably be dead. Xiao Ran ran to another building entrance and repeated the process, blocking its fire escape door as well. He even materialized several cars in the stairwell, further jamming any escape route for the people inside. Oh, and the elevator shaft. Xiao Ran went to the ground floor, pried open the elevator doors, and simply tossed in ice blocks, then added water, completely disabling the elevator shaft from the ground floor up. Now, if the people in Building 4 wanted to leave, there was only one way. Jump. It wasn't that high, just a jump from the 2nd floor. They probably wouldn't die from the fall, or even get seriously injured. Besides, they could tie bed sheets together to climb down, further reducing the risk of injury. But what was the weather like now? In this extreme cold, with toxic hail pelting down, how many could escape unscathed? Some, certainly, but the chances were bound to be extremely low. That was enough. If Building 4 was weakened like this, and the other residents in the complex still couldn't overcome them, then they didn't deserve to live. Xiao Ran was very satisfied with his handiwork. The key was he didn't have to take any risks himself. Time to go. He returned to his villa and closed the iron gate. Han Yun and the other 3 women were still sleeping soundly. The sleeping powder was quite potent. Downstairs, however, Baozi greeted him, wagging its tail. Xiao Ran smiled. When it came to loyalty, there was only Baozi. Han Yun and the others? They only followed and obeyed him because he could provide such good conditions. If he were penniless, to see how their attitude would change. But Xiao Ran believed Baozi would never abandon him. Those who can share poverty and hardship with you, those are the ones truly worth cherishing. The night passed. It was now the 19th day of the apocalypse. Before dawn, Building 4 was in an uproar. The fire escape door leading to the ground floor wouldn't open. At first, no one paid it much mind. Perhaps the weather was too cold, some water had gotten on the door and frozen, sealing it shut. A good hard shove should open it. But one after another, they all failed to open the door. Eventually, everyone in the building was alerted. So, several strong men took turns ramming the door, but it was like ants trying to shake a giant tree. Utterly useless. Out of the way, Lu Yang came over, wielding a fire axe, and started hacking at the door. Wood chips flew instantly. After chopping for a while, Lu Yang got tired and handed the axe to someone else to continue. After about an hour of effort, they finally chopped the fire escape door open. They thought the problem was solved, but when they saw the thick ice wall behind the door, they were collectively dumbfounded. What was going on? Why was there an ice wall in the second-floor stairwell? And they could faintly see pillar-like structures inside it. Was that rebar? What the hell? Wasn't everything fine yesterday, during the day? Who could have sealed off the stairwell in the middle of the night? Did everyone in the complex do this together? Otherwise, one person, or even a few people, couldn't possibly complete such a massive undertaking. They hadn't yet seen the cars behind the ice wall. If they had, their scalps would tingle even more, as if they were in a dream. And how were the cars moved up here? Not even the most daredevil driver would have such skills. Let's try the elevator shaft. Someone suddenly had an idea. So, a group of them went to the elevator shaft and pried open the doors. When they shone a flashlight inside, they were all dumbfounded again. This too was sealed off at the ground floor with thick blocks of ice. What could they do? They were actually trapped in this building. Climb out the windows, another genius suggested. Everyone's eyes lit up. The drop from the second floor to the ground floor was only about 3 meters. Even a direct jump wouldn't kill anyone, and besides, they could tie ropes to climb down, or even throw mattresses and other soft things out first to cushion the fall. But the problem was it was still hailing toxic ice outside. Was this some kind of joke? Besides, adults could jump, but what about the elderly and children? Damn it! Who would do something so despicable? The people in Building 4 cursed. They could risk jumping, but they weren't at their wits' end yet, so no one wanted to take the chance. For now, they just have to wait. After daybreak, the news quickly spread throughout the residential complex. Many didn't believe it and flocked to Building 4 to see for themselves, and everyone was amazed. It was true. Which gods had done this? Performing a good deed without leaving a name? Everyone was incredibly curious. To complete such a project in one night, it definitely couldn't have been done by one person. Especially those cars stuck in the stairwell. That was truly mind-boggling. But this question was destined to remain unanswered forever. The entire residential complex held another meeting. This time, the topic was how to prevent the residents of Building 4 from escaping, to completely lock them inside. Yesterday's meeting had failed to reach a consensus because no one wanted to confront a group of utterly ruthless people. Everyone had hoped someone else would take the lead while they watched from the sidelines. So, with such disunity, they couldn't agree on anything. But today was different. What threat did the people from Building 4 still pose? None. If they wanted to get out now, they could only climb or jump from the second floor, naturally limiting their numbers. So, how could this escape route also be blocked? Everyone eagerly offered suggestions. Some suggested digging out 3 feet of soil around Building 4 beneath the windows, effectively turning the second floor into a third floor. This would make it harder for the people in Building 4 to get down and increase their casualty rate. However, this was a massive undertaking. But since everyone's safety was at stake, they were naturally willing to contribute some effort. They divided the labor by building number, with residents from one building working each day. Additionally, people were assigned to monitor Building 4 24 hours a day. If anyone dared to climb out a window, an alarm would be sounded immediately, and everyone would attack together, beating to death anyone who came down. It was a kill or be killed situation now. The night before last, the residents of Building 4 had slaughtered nearly half the people in Building 3. Who would still feel any sympathy for them? Regardless of whether they were elderly, women, or children, they were all classified as enemies. Xiao Ran, naturally, wouldn't participate in such activities. This earned him insults from some, who said he was only alive and safe thanks to everyone else's efforts, yet he was unwilling to contribute anything. Truly shameless. They said those with money should contribute money, and those without should contribute labor. If you're unwilling to work, fine, but you could at least provide some supplies, right? But Xiao Ran was notoriously tight-fisted. Despicable. As if afraid Xiao Ran couldn't hear, some even shouted through megaphones in the underground garage passageway. Xiao Ran, of course, heard them. He had gone out in the middle of the night to lock up Building 4, even giving Han Yun and the others sleeping pills, precisely because he didn't want to reveal he was responsible. The current reactions of some people were not unexpected. Had they forgotten who he was? He walked out, took his compound bow, and let loose a flurry of arrows. The crowd shrieked, crying out for their parents as they scrambled to escape, but a few were still shot dead or wounded. The dead were quiet. The injured lay on the ground groaning, but before long, they froze to death. Xiao Ran sneered. He hadn't sealed Building 4 out of some overflowing altruism, wanting to save the entire complex. Rather, he felt they might interfere with his own life. After all, he needed to go out searching for energy sources later and didn't want them ambushing him on his return. Of course, the people from Building 4 might do that, and so might people from other buildings. He would never trust anyone. Around 10 o'clock, Han Yun and the other 3 women gradually woke up. They were surprised to find it was so late, but didn't suspect at all that it was due to sleeping pills. Instead, they thought the place was so warm that they had slept exceptionally well. A perfectly plausible assumption. Xiao Ran didn't immediately send them away, even though the trouble with Building 4 was mostly resolved. Breakfast was hot soy milk and fried dough sticks, along with dumplings, all available for them to choose. This naturally made the 4 women incredibly excited and even more curious. Had Xiao Ran prepared an entire room full of food? After breakfast, they did some morning exercise, and by then it was already noon. The 5 of them first took showers, then ate. After eating, Lulu left first because she had to deliver food to her son and also give a portion to the elderly couple next door to thank them for looking after her child. However, not long after Lulu returned to her building, she came back, her face pale with terror. Xiao Ran, my son is missing, she cried out immediately. This is what had happened. When she got home, she found her neighbor's door ajar. Mustering her courage, she went inside and found blood everywhere. The elderly couple lay in pools of their own blood, having been dead for some time, and her son was gone. What else could she do? She could only come to Xiao Ran for help. Would Xiao Ran help her find her son? Firstly, no. What did someone else's son have to do with him? He had only made a deal with Lulu. She provided her body. He provided food. What else concerned him? Secondly, even if he were willing to help, how would he find him? Go door to door asking? Who knew if opening a door would greet him with a kitchen knife or a club? When his own safety was at stake, how could Xiao Ran possibly take the risk? So, Xiao Ran merely offered Lulu some comfort, explaining the difficulty of the search. Beyond that, he could do nothing more. Han Yun and the other 2 women naturally agreed with Xiao Ran's decision. Similarly, what did Lulu's son have to do with them? At most, they might offer a few words of sympathy out of basic human decency. However, if Xiao Ran had agreed to look for Lulu's son, they would have absolutely tried to dissuade him. What if something happened to Xiao Ran? It wasn't that they had any deep affection for Xiao Ran. Rather, the villa's doors were all secured with passwords and fingerprint scanners, or opened with a remote control, and Xiao Ran hadn't given them any access. So, if something happened to Xiao Ran, they would be trapped and die in the basement. Imagine, with no one to add wood to the fireplace. How would they stay warm once it burned out? Better him than them. Comparatively, their own lives were of course the most important, expecting them to have some noble conscience, to risk their own survival to help others. Sorry, not happening. What could Lulu do? She had no idea where her son was. In this freezing weather, even if she went door to door searching, how long before she froze to death? She could only resign herself to fate. From this, one could see that this woman was also quite selfish. In her view, her own safety was clearly more important. Xiao Ran just chuckled. He didn't need Lulu to follow him for a lifetime. Did it matter to him whether she was good or evil? If she dared to betray him, a single bullet would solve the problem. It was like going to a club to find an escort. Would you really vet their character or morals? Heh. Of course, Lulu was still very worried about her son, spending the whole afternoon distracted and in a daze. Just when Xiao Ran thought the day would pass uneventfully, a loud crash echoed, followed by the blare of sirens. It was definitely a police siren, not a car alarm. Could it be a police car? Xiao Ran went to the 3rd floor and looked out, but it was already past 5 in the afternoon, and the thick fog had rolled in again, reducing visibility to about 2 meters. So what could he see? Nothing at all. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of curiosity, but to go out just for that? No way. Under the current conditions, the chances of anyone breaching his safe house were 0, unless the military was involved or military-grade weapons were used. Xiao Ran went downstairs, first preparing dinner for Leopard, then went to the basement to call Han Yun and the other 3 women for dinner. After dinner, they had some fruit. Xiao Ran took out a portable hard drive, plugged it into the TV, and let the 4 women binge-watch shows to pass the time. In stark contrast to the lively comfort within the villa, a certain group was suffering misfortune. Time rewound slightly. A vehicle careened into the residential complex, swerving erratically as if driven by a drunkard. In reality, the ground was so slippery that the driver couldn't control it. Bang! The vehicle slammed heavily into the entrance of Building 5. Due to the impact, the vehicle's equipment malfunctioned. The emergency lights on top immediately started flashing, and the siren wailed. It was a police vehicle, to be precise, a prison transport van. A few minutes later, a door was pulled open, and a woman stumbled out, followed by a second, then a third. After the 9th person emerged, no one else came out. All 9 were women, of varying ages and builds. The youngest were in their early 20s, the oldest in their late 30s. One of the women in her late 30s was extremely overweight. Combined with her thick clothes, she truly resembled a ball. Although they had disembarked from a prison van, they wore ordinary clothes, making it impossible to tell if they were guards or prisoners. The crash wasn't severe, but all 9 women suffered some scrapes and bruises. They rested for a moment, then the heaviest woman said, "The van's wrecked, and with this thick fog, we can't go on. We'll have to spend the night here. Let's find a place to stay first. It's freezing out here, and we need to get some food," said a woman with a tattoo on her neck. "Let's go." They went to the 2nd floor and knocked on the door of 201, but after a while with no answer, they moved on to knock on the door of 202. "Who is it?" This time, someone answered immediately. Inside, a bald, burly man was peering out through the peephole, a meat cleaver in his hand. The tattooed woman stepped forward and said with a smile, "Hey there, open up. Me and my girls are looking for a place to get out of the cold. If you can give us shelter, we'll play however you want." Inside, the bald man glanced out, confirmed there were only 9 women, and a chilling smile spread across his face. He hid the cleaver-wielding right hand behind his back, then unlocked the door. The 9 women quickly squeezed inside. It was truly freezing outside. Once all 9 women were in, the bald man slammed the door shut, then brandished the cleaver, his face contorting with ferocity. He roared, "All of you get into the room now. Anyone disobeys, and I'll chop her up." There were ropes in the inner room. He planned to force the women to tie each other's hands. Then he'd kill the ugly ones outright, and the pretty ones. They would naturally be for his pleasure. But to his utter surprise, not a single one of the 9 women showed any fear. This sight left him somewhat dumbfounded. But the next moment, he brandished the cleaver. "You want me to make an example out of a few of you before you listen? Is that it?" He took a step forward, the blade glinting menacingly. It was terrifying. Unexpectedly, 3 of the 9 women didn't retreat but advanced, all glaring at him fiercely. One was the heavy woman, another was the tattooed woman, and the third was a woman whose hair covered half her face. Still, one could discern her stunning beauty, her eyes resolute, like those of a wounded lone wolf. The bald, burly man was stunned for a moment. Then a grin spread across his face. 3 women wanted to take him on? "Ha, I'll kill this fat chick first. Then we'll see if you still dare to act tough." Just as he was about to raise his cleaver, he saw the 3 women raise their hands simultaneously. Each now held a gun, the dark muzzles aimed straight at him. Holy crap! The bald man's hand went limp. With a clatter, the cleaver fell to the floor. He immediately threw his hands up. "Don't do anything rash. Please don't. I was just kidding around with you. Ha ha ha." "Xiao Lu, tie him up," the heavier woman said. "You got it." One of the women stepped forward, pulled a bra from under her clothes, and used it as a makeshift rope to tie the burly man's hands. At first, the bald man scoffed. It was just a bra. He was sure he could snap it with a good tug. But once the woman finished tying him, he secretly strained against it and found he couldn't break free at all. His expression instantly soured. Now, he was completely at their mercy, like a fish on the chopping block. The tattooed woman holstered her gun, picked up the cleaver from the floor, and gestured with it near the bald man's neck. This scared the piss out of the bald man. He hurriedly said, "Let's talk this through. Please don't." "Shut up." The tattooed woman pressed the cleaver to his throat. "I have questions for you. Answer them honestly." "Yes, yes," the bald man agreed, cold sweat trickling down as he felt the chill of the blade against his skin. These women were ruthless. Who on earth were they? "What's the current situation in this residential complex?" the tattooed woman asked. The bald man obediently started talking. He mentioned the brutality in Building 4, how its occupants had been sealed inside by some unknown group. He also spoke of Xiao Ran's wealth, how he often posted bounties, and that he was a ruthless man himself, with at least 30 deaths on his hands. After he finished, the 9 women exchanged surprised glances. The apocalypse had begun less than 20 days ago, and the outside world had already devolved into this. Who were these 9 women? Convicts. The heavier woman was Mei Ting, known as Boss Mei, a human trafficker sentenced to 20 years. The tattooed woman was Xiaoan, called Boss Zhou, a drug dealer with blood on her hands, originally sentenced to death, but given a 2-year reprieve because she was pregnant. The beauty whose hair obscured her face was Su Qingmei, sentenced to 9 years for manslaughter due to excessive self-defense. These 3 were the leaders among the 9. After the cataclysm struck, a riot broke out in the prison. They seized guns, fought the guards for days, and finally, when a thick fog lifted, escaped in a prison transport vehicle. However, due to the lingering fog, they couldn't see the road clearly and ended up crashing into this residential complex. So the outside world is this chaotic too. It's to be expected. The prison rioted for nearly 10 days with no external reinforcements. That means society has completely collapsed. So, we're all free now. Excitement flashed across all 9 women's faces. Escaping prison was a crime that added to their sentences. They had broken out, but who among them wasn't afraid? Before the might of the state, they were as insignificant as ants. But now, armies, police, they were all gone. Who would come after them now? In this powerless world, unless someone knew them from before, who would even know their identities? That guy, Xiao Ran, seems to have a lot of supplies. He even has heating and electricity. Should we take over his villa? A few of the women said excitedly. Don't be fooled by the fact they were women. Their crimes were far from minor. And with the world in such chaos, what do they have left to fear? The heavier woman, Mei Ting, molded over for a moment, then smiled. That Xiao Ran is probably relying on some fancy toy gun that shoots poison. But we have real guns. What travels farther, a bullet or a squirt gun? The other women nodded. Mei Ting's analysis made perfect sense. With his fortified villa and his special toy gun, Xiao Ran could indeed attack and defend. But they had real firearms. Now that they were here, Xiao Ran's reign as local tyrant was about to end. His biggest weakness is that he's a lek, and we just happen to be women. So, if we can trick him into opening the door, he'll be at our mercy, Zhou Yaoan said, then viciously swiped the cleaver. Spurt. Blood gushed from the bald man's throat. He thrashed violently, but with his hands bound, he could only flop on the ground like a landed fish. Within seconds, it was over. He lay motionless in a pool of his own blood. His eyes remained wide open, filled with terror and unwillingness, as if he couldn't accept that he had died at the hands of a group of women. Let's go. We're heading to the villa, Zhou Yaoan said, casually tossing the cleaver aside. Mei Ting nodded. Although this room was about 10 degrees warmer than outside, night had fallen and the temperature was dropping rapidly. Even inside, it was below freezing and still getting colder. The fact that the villa had heating was incredibly enticing. I'm not going. I'll part ways with you here, Su Qingmei suddenly said. Mei Ting and Zhou Yaoan both turned to look at her, a dangerous glint in their eyes. Su Qingmei toyed with her gun. The world is so chaotic now. Even if we split up, no one needs to worry about anyone snitching. Killing is no big deal these days. Who cares about our identities as convicts? Previously, the 9 women had stuck together, advancing and retreating as one. If any single one of them were caught, she could easily reveal the other's whereabouts. Therefore, if anyone tried to leave the group, the rest would deal with them together. But things are different now. Who would still hold their past crimes against them? Killing sprees were happening constantly. Building 4 had even seen half its residents slaughtered in a single night. In the past, something like that would have brought in the army to suppress it. Now, who cared? Compared to that, what were their own past misdeeds? Mei Ting and Zhou Yaoan exchanged a glance, and both nodded slightly. All right then, we'll split up here. Su Qingmei, since you're leaving us on your own accord. Be careful next time we meet. Goodbye. Zhou Yaoan and Mei Ting left the room. The remaining 6 women looked at each other and quickly followed, leaving Su Qingmei alone inside. She walked over and closed the front door, then went to the bedroom door and opened it. A woman was standing right there. Startled by Su Qingmei suddenly opening the door, she stumbled back, hurriedly saying, I'm a victim too. I'm for next door. Those men outside dragged me here. My husband. They killed him. Su Qingmei's expression remained unchanged. Go back to your own place, she said coldly. Oh yes. Yes. The woman in the room quickly scurried to the front door, opened it, and fled back to her own apartment next door. Su Qingmei closed the door and sat down, a look of relief finally appearing on her face. She took out a photograph. It showed two people, likely sisters. The older one was her, looking no more than 20, so the photo must have been taken a few years ago. The other was a young girl of about 16. Both were smiling sweetly, charming and beautiful. She pressed the photograph to her chest. Little sister, you have to hold on. I will find you. Meanwhile, Xiaoan and Mate Ting led 6 other women to the underground garage. They shone a flashlight around before heading towards Building 8. Damn, it's freezing, someone complained. Mei Ting chuckled. Once we're inside the villa, we won't have to worry about the cold. Yeah. The women all nodded emphatically, full of anticipation. The garage wasn't that big. Even though they weren't familiar with it, and it was dark, they reached the passage leading to the villa after a few minutes. They were prepared, having already opened their umbrellas. One couldn't be too careful, especially since they were here to cause trouble, so they were naturally even more cautious. Bang, bang, bang. They knocked on the door. The woman at the front was named Ingzi, the prettiest of the 8. To lure Xiao Ran into opening the door, they naturally pushed their most attractive member forward. Too bad Su Qingmei had left the group. Otherwise, if she had come, TSK, no man would have been able to resist. What do you want? A man's voice came through the intercom. Ingzi swayed her hips, forced a smile, and said in a coquettish voice, Big brother, didn't you say you'd give food to anyone willing to sleep with you? Hee hee, all of us sisters want to sleep with you. Xiao Ran saw them clearly through the security monitor. There were 8 of them in total. Though all women, the quality of a few was hard to describe. Especially that plump woman. Was she serious? If she were a streetwalker, would anyone even want her if she paid them? And what was that? Xiao Ran saw the gun. The plump woman was hiding behind her back. They thought Xiao Ran only had 1 security camera, but he actually had 3 installed in different locations, all with infrared imaging. So, they were here to rob his villa? But how did such a squad of women suddenly appear in the residential complex? Could it be? A thought struck him, and he recalled the earlier crashing sound and police sirens. Was it these 8 women? All right, since you've delivered yourselves to my doorstep, I'll take care of you all at once. Otherwise, if these 8 women scattered throughout the complex, it would be troublesome for him to find them. Come here. Xiao Ran first turned off the monitor, then called Han Yun and the other 3 women over. He didn't want the 4 of them to see him using his dimensional space. Han Yun felt a bit sour. What's wrong? Now that you have new women, are you going to cast us old ones aside? Xiao Ran smiled. These newcomers are no pushovers. They're even carrying guns. Guns? Han Yun and the other 3 women were startled. Zhang Jingya was the first to say, then just ignore them. They can't get in anyway. Right. Han Yun and the other 2 women chimed in. The villa had everything they needed and was incredibly safe, so why open the door and clash with a group of armed people? Xiao Ran ignored them, simply telling them to hide behind the screen. Then he turned off the lights. With a press of the remote, clack, the iron gate slowly opened towards the passageway. Outside, the 8 women looked at the pitch-black interior and suddenly hesitated. Why was it completely dark? Was Xiao Ran already on guard against them? But, as soon as the door opened, a wave of warmth wafted out, making them feel an intense, comforting heat. The sensation was indescribably pleasant. They couldn't help but step inside. Then, one by one, they vanished into thin air without a sound. It was so dark that those at the back didn't even notice the ones in front disappearing until 5 of them were gone. Just as Xiaoan shone her flashlight, she stopped abruptly in horror. Where were they? The ones in front? How could there not even be a shadow? Ingzi! Xiao Lu! She shouted, not realizing her own voice was trembling. Her shout made Mei Ting and the other remaining woman stop as well. They simultaneously shone their flashlights all around the room, searching for their 5 companions. But they found nothing. Now, the 3 women were utterly panicked. The darkness, combined with the unknown, created an intense fear. Just then, a figure emerged from the darkness, caught directly in their flashlight beams. Almost simultaneously, Xiaoan and Mei Ting raised their guns and pulled the triggers at the figure. Bang! 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 In the darkness, each bullet fired from the handguns produced a bright flash. However, after firing several shots, Xiaoan and Mei Ting were horrified to find the figure still standing. Your aim is terrible, Xiao Ran chuckled. Were Mei Ting and Xiaoan's shooting skills really that bad, merely outlining their target? Of course not. It was because he had opened a spatial portal on the iron gate and all incoming bullets were sucked into his dimensional space. Therefore, it would have been strange if even a single bullet had hit Xiao Ran. They didn't even hit anything inside the room. Otherwise, bullets striking the walls or tables would surely have made a sound. But Xiaoan and the other two women were too consumed by intense fear to think about that. They shivered, finding it hard to even breathe. Xiao Ran wouldn't take the slightest risk. Seeing that the three women weren't advancing, and not knowing if their guns were out of ammo, he certainly wasn't going to move closer. Instead, he switched on his powerful flashlight and shone it at them. Swish, swish, swish. Several bullets shot out silently from the dimensional space. The spatial portal was less than a meter away from the three women, so Xiao Ran's accuracy was naturally impeccable. Hud, hud, hud. All three women were shot in the forehead simultaneously and fell backward. With that, all 8 were eliminated. Xiao Ran walked over, first collecting the bodies and their guns, then went outside the passage and dumped all 8 corpses. He returned to the villa, closed the door, and turned the lights back on. Only then did Han Yun and the other 3 women peek out from behind the screen, their faces filled with fear. Guns. Who wouldn't be afraid? No matter how tough you were in the face of a gun, you were as vulnerable as a baby. Those people? Han Yun asked, her voice trembling. Dealt with. The bodies have been moved outside, Xiao Ran replied casually, but his brow furrowed. He had checked. 4 of the 8 women had tattoos. Therefore, they couldn't possibly be police officers. Combined with the sound of sirens, this naturally led him to guess that these 8 women had obtained guns and a police car from the police station. Unfortunately, he hadn't seen a vehicle. Otherwise, he would have realized his guess was wrong. The women's guns and gear hadn't come from the police station, but had been looted from a prison. In other words, ordinary people could now easily obtain firearms. This was a huge problem. Xiao Ran had mastered dimensional space, and with the bullets stored inside, he was practically invincible in a frontal assault. But what if someone shot him in the back? It was impossible to guard against every sneak attack. I'll have to be extremely careful when I go out from now on. Luckily, the car is bulletproof. Next time, I need to get a bulletproof vest and a riot helmet from the police station. Xiao Ran sounded a warning bell for himself. He couldn't afford to be careless. He only possessed a dimensional space. He hadn't become Superman. Enough thinking about that. It was late. Time for bed. Another night passed, and the apocalypse entered its 20th day. 20 days. Xiao Ran watched the gradually whitening sky outside his window, clicking his tongue in amazement. Human resilience truly is formidable. 20 days. And it seemed like half, or even more, of the people in the entire residential complex were still alive. Moreover, if not for the infighting among humans, there would have been even more survivors. This couldn't help but astonish Xiao Ran. He lingered in bed for a while before getting up. Downstairs on the first floor, Leopard greeted him, wagging its tail. Xiao Ran smiled, tossed it 2 meat buns, then opened the basement door and went down with breakfast. Of course, he had confirmed it was safe via the surveillance system. He only ever trusted himself. Han Yun and the other 3 women were sleeping soundly. Compared to the severe cold of their own homes, it was much warmer here. Lying in the bed, it was so incredibly warm. The only downside was that it was a bit crowded. 1 bed for 4 people was definitely a squeeze. But compared to the warmth, this drawback was entirely negligible. The 4 women got up one after another, preparing to wash up and eat breakfast. After breakfast, Xiao Ran had the 4 women binge-watch shows or read novels, while he himself went up to the 2nd floor. He couldn't always stay with the 4 women. With nothing to do right now, what else could a man and women do together? The temperature seemed to have dropped again. Xiao Ran glanced at the thermometer. The room temperature had fallen to 15 degrees Celsius, whereas before it had been 23 or 24 degrees. He added more firewood, then opened a window to check the outside temperature. Good heavens, -41 degrees. If it was this cold during the day, what about at night? Xiao Ran looked out at the other residential buildings. It wasn't easy for those who had survived until now, but continuing to live would only become increasingly difficult. No air conditioning, no underfloor heating, and certainly no fireplaces. They could only huddle together for warmth, but that was just a drop in the ocean. So, today, tomorrow, the day after, people would likely freeze to death every day from now on. Xiao Ran sighed with emotion, but it was just a fleeting thought. He wasn't a savior, nor did he want to be one. He just wanted to look out for himself. At most, he chuckled to himself. He'd taken a few beauties. After all, being alone was too boring. After 6 months or a year, he'd probably go crazy. Based on this line of thinking, Xiao Ran hadn't kicked Han Yun and the other 3 out to their own places. That definitely wouldn't last 2 days. Although they didn't meet Xiao Ran's definition of top-tier beauties, there were no other options right now. When you have no choice, your standards naturally drop. However, the four women could only stay in a basement. Xiao Ran would never let them upstairs. During the day, much of the heavy fog had dispersed, and visibility reached about 20 meters. Should I go out and search for supplies today? Xiao Ran wondered. It was so cold, fewer people would dare to venture out. Exposed to such extreme cold, a person's lungs would definitely be damaged within about 20 minutes, possibly even leading to organ necrosis. Of course, it was fine if you stayed in a vehicle. Xiao Ran calculated. His vehicle, after modifications, had excellent insulation, so that wouldn't be a problem. Therefore, he just needed to ensure he wasn't outside for more than 20 minutes at a time. No, to be safe, he should limit it to under 15 minutes. He also needed to go to the police station to get a bulletproof vest and helmet. Xiao Ran decided to go out for another reason. If he stayed in the villa, he'd keep thinking about the four fairies downstairs he could dally with. Xiao Ran worried he might die young. Why did so many ancient emperors have short lives? A large part of it was due to indulging in pleasures to their own demise. A lesson from the past. Since he was going out, he naturally had to be fully prepared. Xiao Ran not only put on his warmest winter clothes, but also used heat patches. After all, today's temperature was another 20 degrees colder than his last trip out. This was no joking matter. After some thought, he prepared 3 days' worth of food and clean water in the basement, just in case he got delayed outside, and returned to find 4 corpses. Or only 3 people left. The latter scenario was even more terrifying. Since he had temporarily taken the 4 women in, Xiao Ran naturally didn't want them to starve or die of thirst. However, he still deadbolted the door. So, if he really did kick the bucket outside, Han Yun and the others would have to accompany him in death. I'm keeping you alive. If I die, it's only fair you accompany me to the grave, right? He treated Leopard no worse than Han Yun and the others. Xiao Ran also prepared a large amount of dog food and fresh water, instructing Leopard to eat only 1 portion per day. After many days of training, Leopard could understand such simple commands. It tugged at Xiao Ran's pants while wagging its tail furiously, as if trying to persuade him not to go out. Xiao Ran smiled, patted Leopard's head, but still broke free from its grasp and went out. He got into the car. Opening the door, he saw the hail outside had almost stopped. Not a single one had fallen for a good while. Xiao Ran started the engine and drove off, immediately feeling the vehicle drift a little. The road was too slippery. The ground was now entirely covered by a thick, incredibly smooth layer of ice formed from hailstones. People or vehicles on it were like skating on an ice rink. This was despite his G-Wagon having been modified with powerful anti-skid tires and having enough weight to maintain sufficient stability. Otherwise, the car would probably be skidding uncontrollably, likely having crashed multiple times already. The entire city must have turned into a giant ice rink. Except this ice rink was far too cold. Even fully bundled up, you could only stay outside for 15 to 20 minutes before your lungs would definitely necrose. Xiao Ran controlled the vehicle and drove out of the residential complex. This scene was naturally witnessed by many, who looked on with a mixture of shock and envy. The good news was that the fog had lifted and the toxic hail had almost stopped. But the bad news was that the temperature had plummeted again. Sioux City had never experienced extreme temperatures below -10 degrees Celsius, so whose winter clothing could possibly withstand it? Were more layers? Leaving aside whether one could even put on that much, even if possible, how bulky would a person become? It was so slippery outside, and the ice layer was toxic. What if you fell and your skin got scraped? Of the people who went out searching for supplies last time, more than half hadn't returned. Now, with even lower temperatures and slicker roads, how many would still dare to venture out? Xiao Ran had checked the map beforehand and knew where the nearest police station was. A proper station, not just a precinct office. The latter would be too small. He probably wouldn't find what he needed there. The nearest station was about 5 kilometers away. Xiao Ran drove at a steady 20 kilometers per hour. It was only 5 kilometers after all. Why bother speeding? Visibility was currently 15 to 20 meters. Driving slowly, he could still make out the road. Left at the next intersection. Straight at the one after that. Xiao Ran muttered to himself. Checking the car's internal temperature display, he saw it was only 0 degrees Celsius. He immediately activated the thermal barriers on all windows except the windshield. Instantly, he could feel the temperature rising. The windshield couldn't be covered, of course. He needed visibility to drive. Checking the temp again, it had climbed to 10 degrees. If he turned on the electric blanket too, he really wouldn't feel the cold. But that would consume Too much fuel. Xiao Ran chuckled. Did he really need to worry about fuel? He just hit up a few more gas stations today. Even though emptying one station would last him a long time, who would complain about having too much? Knowing his own caution, he figured he'd need to stockpile enough supplies to last several hundred lifetimes. It was the same for food and fresh water. He couldn't let his energy reserves be a weak link. However, he arrived at the police station first. Getting out of the car, damn it, Xiao Ran couldn't help but shiver, as if he'd suddenly stepped from summer into an ice cave. The problem was the wind. It was still blowing hard outside, a howling, bone-chilling gale. Xiao Ran quickly headed inside the police station. The ground was slippery. He almost fell, but thankfully steadied himself. Besides, he was wearing thick gloves, so even if he had to brace himself on the ice, his skin wouldn't be burned by whatever made the frost toxic. The main door was ajar. Xiao Ran gave it a push, but surprisingly, it wouldn't budge. It was frozen solid. He threw his full strength into another push, and the door finally moved. He wasn't trying to swing it wide open. His priority was to get it shut behind him. Once closed, the howling cold wind couldn't blow in anymore. Instantly, it felt a fraction warmer. Just a fraction. Without air conditioning or heating. In this severe cold, the indoor temperature was at best minus 30 degrees Celsius. Fortunately, Xiao Ran's cold weather gear was good enough. He should have no problem lasting 20 or even 30 minutes in such temperatures. He began searching room by room. Empty office, empty reception area, empty. Xiao Ran suddenly froze. This room wasn't empty. It was a body. More precisely, a mauled human corpse. The face was gnawed away, so the features were unrecognizable. The chest was also hollowed out, making it impossible to determine the gender from that. However, seeing the curve of the waist and hips and a tattered floral dress, he was certain it was a woman. Cannibalism? That was Xiao Ran's first thought, but he immediately shook his head, dismissing it. If it were cannibalism, would someone hold the victim's face and gnaw on it like that? Also, the chest looked like it had been clawed out. Due to the severe cold, the flesh was surprisingly well preserved. It definitely wasn't cut by a knife. It was the work of a beast, a ferocious one at that. Xiao Ran replayed the scene in his mind. A huge beast pounced on a woman, savagely mauled her face, then tore open her chest and devoured the organs inside. Why the organs? First, organs have a higher water content. Second, they're warmer. These two factors made the organs a prime target in the current conditions. Extreme cold and no clean water. So, the beast devoured the organs and then abandoned the rest of the corpse. In the city, human prey like this was readily available. With tools, humans were the masters of this world. But barehanded, too many beasts could easily kill them. Could it be a Siberian tiger escaped from a zoo? Xiao Ran mused. Or a Siberian wolf. Why those? Because other predators, like lions or leopards, could also kill and eat people this way, but they live in tropical climates and would have frozen to death in such extreme cold. A snow leopard was a possibility, but were there snow leopards in the zoo? No. So, the most likely culprits were a Siberian tiger or a polar bear. But the zoo was at least 10 kilometers away. How did this beast manage to get here through the toxic hailstorm? Xiao Ran found it incredible. But to say someone nearby was keeping a wild beast was even more impossible. This wasn't the Middle East, where some rich tycoon might keep a lion or tiger at home. So, it was strange. Or maybe my reasoning is flawed. It wasn't one beast, but several? In that case, the beast could be much smaller. But that didn't seem right either, because apart from the face, only the organs were devoured. If a pack of beasts had fed on it, how could they have avoided eating the limbs? Did they line up one by one? Xiao Ran backed out of the room, puzzled. At the same time, his alertness spiked to its peak. Step by step, cautiously. Perhaps that beast or pack of beasts hadn't left yet and was still lurking somewhere in the police station. He absolutely couldn't let his guard down. He had come to collect bulletproof vests, riot helmets, and the like to increase his safety, not to walk into danger. In this state, Xiao Ran felt his adrenaline pumping. He was in a state of heightened arousal, as if some power was awakening within him. He continued his search. 2 rooms over, Xiao Ran saw more bodies. This time, there were 2 men clearly police officers. But, just like the female victim, their organs had also been hollowed out. Their faces, however, weren't mauled. He could see them clearly. Their necks had been snapped. One could imagine they encountered the beast. A single swipe to the face had enough force to snap their necks, killing them instantly. Both male corpses died the same way. This convinced Xiao Ran it wasn't a pack of beasts, but a single one, and an incredibly strong one at that, capable of snapping a person's neck with one blow. Xiao Ran's heart pounded faster. Thump, thump, thump. He could hear it clearly. If this beast attacked him head-on, Xiao Ran wouldn't be afraid. Whether it was using a spatial portal to whisk it away or firing bullets from another dimension, he believed he could handle even an elephant with ease. But the enemy was hidden. He didn't know where. It could even be right behind him. This naturally made him tense and fearful. Fear wasn't always a bad thing. It made one more cautious, and the desire to live could unleash boundless potential. Xiao Ran didn't want to die, so if this beast wanted to attack him, to eat him, he would use all his strength to kill it in return. Thump, 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 his heart beat faster and faster. Xiao Ran seemed to suddenly enter a wondrous state. From the moment he stepped into the police station and found the first body, Xiao Ran's adrenaline had been pumping, a strange sensation brewing deep within him, as if something was about to awaken. Now his tension and unease had intensified, the feeling growing stronger with each passing second. But before he could quite grasp what it was, suddenly, a fierce gust of wind assaulted him from behind. In that instant, Xiao Ran abruptly entered an incredibly uncanny state. He, to his utter astonishment, could see behind him. No, not just behind him. It was as if he had gained a god's eye view, like in a video game, able to see everything around him. Front, back, left, right, above, below. Behind him, a black and white behemoth was lunging forward. Its speed was incredible. Xiao Ran knew he definitely wouldn't be able to dodge this attack. His mental reflexes outpaced his body. The instant he saw the behemoth lunging, he immediately opened a spatial portal behind himself. 5 by 5 meters, enough to shield him completely. But the god's eye view in his mind lasted only for an instant before vanishing. Xiao Ran immediately spun around. In a fleeting glimpse, he saw the behemoth was the size of a lion, covered in thick fur, yet it was black and white, mostly black with patches of white. But even though it was lion-sized, Xiao Ran was certain this damn thing was a husky. But how could a husky grow that big? It was the size of a lion, a male lion at that. The husky didn't crash into the portal. Instead, it seemed to see or sense the portal's presence, skidding to a halt right at the edge. Not only did it stop, but it also took a few steps back. It bared its teeth, letting out a low growl at Xiao Ran, yet its paws kept backing away. For a moment, Xiao Ran didn't have time to ponder how a husky could grow so enormous. He believed the 3 people from before had all been killed by this husky, and eaten by it too. With such a massive size, its strength would naturally increase. A single swipe of its paw could easily snap a person's neck. How could Xiao Ran hesitate against such a ferocious beast? Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Bullets immediately poured out from the spatial portal. The husky clearly hadn't expected Xiao Ran to have such a move. Although it sensed something was wrong and started leaping to dodge, Xiao Ran didn't hold back, unleashing hundreds of bullets at once. How could it possibly dodge such a dense barrage? The husky was hit instantly, but astonishingly, only by a single bullet. Such incredible speed. The bullet struck its rump, but what shocked Xiao Ran was that it had only penetrated about 2 centimeters deep. He could faintly see the base of the bullet. Holy crap, is your hide made of Kevlar or something? The husky, struck by the bullet, yelped in pain and became enraged. It roared at Xiao Ran, baring its fangs, which were about 7 centimeters long. A bite like that could easily tear through a man's throat. But it merely stared intently at Xiao Ran with its jet-black eyes for a couple of moments, then immediately turned and fled. Its speed was astounding, and it vanished into the darkness in an instant. Even in broad daylight, many rooms in the police station were dim, and windowless rooms were pitch black, making it very easy to hide. Xiao Ran backed up against a wall, opening the spatial portal right in front of him, almost flush against his body. He panted heavily, sweat pouring down like rain. Case solved. The 3 people from before were all killed and eaten by this husky. Huskies, often jokingly called one of the clowns of the tundra, were originally Siberian sled dogs, so they're exceptionally cold-resistant. It wasn't surprising it could survive in such low temperatures. But how could a husky get so huge? Had it freaking mutated? Mutation? Could this cataclysm also cause animals to mutate? Xiao Ran frowned. Based on what he knew, the husky's size had multiplied several times over. Its weight had gone from perhaps 20 or 30 kilograms to at least 100, accompanied by a corresponding increase in strength. And this thing could even dodge bullets. That meant its speed was also astonishing, its agility off the charts. Moreover, its hide was incredibly tough, comparable to a bulletproof vest. A dog like this, how could it not be mutated? It took a hit, so it definitely wants to kill me now. What a coincidence. I'm pretty vindictive myself, and I hate leaving loose ends. So, since we're enemies now, I'm going to finish you. Xiao Ran took a deep breath and strode out of the room. Bring it on. Let's settle this. Xiao Ran usually played it extremely safe, but when it was time to fight for his life, he would never back down. Let's see who kills who. Xiao Ran advanced cautiously, marveling inwardly. When the husky ambushed him earlier, he'd entered that incredibly strange state, like gaining a god's eye view where everything around him was laid bare. Well, in his mind's eye, more accurately. If he could maintain that state, the husky trying to ambush him again? Dream on. But how could he trigger that state again? Xiao Ran had no idea. It was as if he'd forgotten about the husky, continuing to search room by room. He found more bodies. All of them had their internal organs devoured. The husky's doing. Xiao Ran didn't feel much anger. Killing, death, even cannibalism were all too common these days. Besides, when humans were dominant, they hunted all sorts of animals. Now that humanity was weakened and certain animals were rising, for them to turn humans into food seemed almost natural. Because the fundamental law of this world was survival of the fittest. It applied to humans, and it applied to the entire food chain. But that husky saw humans as food, and Xiao Ran would be no exception. Not to mention, he had injured it, sealing their enmity. Xiao Ran was convinced the husky hadn't left. Instead, it was looking for an opportunity to strike. Any moment now. Under this intense pressure, Xiao Ran's adrenaline surged again. That strange sensation returned, but it felt like something was still missing. He couldn't quite enter the god's eye view. Whoosh! Just then, a fierce gust of wind. The husky attacked. In that instant, Xiao Ran finally broke through whatever barrier it was and regained the god's eye view. He saw it. This time, the husky burst out from a doorway to his diagonal side, swiping a paw straight at his face. If that paw connected, forgetting a broken neck, his face would be severely mauled. It wasn't impossible his entire face could be torn off. Xiao Ran snorted. The spatial portal opened, an invitation into a trap, while simultaneously, thousands of bullets erupted from it. Thousands of rounds. To kill this husky, Xiao Ran was holding nothing back, sparing no expense. Such a terrifying creature had to be eliminated immediately. The husky seemed to possess a powerful sixth sense. Though the spatial portal was invisible to the naked eye, it slammed on the brakes, stopping dead in its tracks, then spun around and bolted.